yeah, we got to overturn.
You're listening to the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. It's good to be back. It's been a while. As I was telling our producer Vick, off the air, and tonight's guest who will introduce in a moment, we took the summer off pretty much. We took all of July and August off to recharge, focus on other projects, mainly the book, Good Folks, Mad City, Life on the Edge, and the FDNY and NYPD, my first book that I released, which was a trip and a half, to say the least. It was a lot of fun. And it's been a very rewarding process. We've sold over 200 copies of that, which I'm very thrilled about, of that particular project, and some other ones going on as well. But it's good to be back. We did miss you guys. We did need a break, but we certainly enjoyed doing Mike to New Haven. So to be back with all of you this evening is great. We have a great guest to bring the show back. And if you haven't checked out the previous episodes, you had a whole summer to catch up. So go back through the archive if you can. And we're going to build upon what we've built in the previous months and years with some new guests and some new shows in the ensuing months as we round out 2024. Tonight is volume 48 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, and it's episode 332 of the Mike the New Haven podcast. I did want to mention this because this happened over the summer before we run the advertisements, and get into tonight's show with our guest who I'll introduce in a moment. But there's a sad loss in the ESU family. So Rob Savori, who I had the chance of meeting a couple times down at Floyd Bennett Field. Very nice man, very nice guy. His brother's currently in the emergency service unit, and his father, Bob Savori, was a world-renowned E-man in the emergency service unit, primarily in Truck 1. Back in July, we lost Rob, unfortunately. Rob took his own life, and nobody saw it coming. It was very shocking, as any sudden death is, no matter the cause. But I just wanted to take a second and just mention, and again, I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Rob as deeply as other people did, but always, like I said, a very, very nice man. And my time interacting with him was always a pleasure to be around at Floyd Bennett Field. Had a quiet way about him, didn't really bring a lot of attention to himself, went about his job in a very understated, under the radar kind of way, but always got the job done. And there was a lot of great stories that after his death, I got to hear about. And I know it's been a couple months now, but just wanted to send my condolences to the Savori family. And Rob was a good man who, again, you know what, if you're struggling, whatever it is, reach out. You know, there's always someone that wants to listen, always someone that wants to help. And we certainly wish Rob was still here. We do miss him. So my condolences to the Savori family. On that note, we'll run the advertisements. The first thing is MC Media Editing Services. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. And of course, we also have Billy Ryan, who's back in the fold. We'll run his ad right now. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. Thanks to Bill. I'll do the intro in a moment before I forget, because Seth Garr wanted me to mention this. For those of you not aware by now, there will be the 9/11 ceremonies down at Truck 2 in Harlem coming up this Wednesday. So unfortunately, I won't be there. I have work obligations that I could not change. So last year I had the chance to go down to 2 Truck and see the guys, which was great. But if you're going to be in the area, swing by 2 Truck if you can, along with the other ESU trucks. It was mentioned Chief Anamone will be there amongst a few other prominent guest with a deep attachment to the NYPD and the emergency service unit as a whole. And you can contact Seth, and I believe you can also contact Anta Tukovic, who is also in charge of putting that together. All right, my next guest was involved in public service in different forms over the course of 3 decades. It began in the United States Marine Corps as a military police officer from 1979 until 1983. After that, an interesting transition, to say the least, as a bodyguard to the royal family of Jordan and the Shah of Iran's family as well, before transitioning into law enforcement, originally with Westchester County Corrections, and then the NYPD in 1988, was the PBA Rookie of the Year, received numerous commendations over the course of his career, and it'd be in 1993 where he'd make the leap into the Emergency Service Unit, where he spent the remainder of his career, going to many big jobs along the way, as we will certainly discuss tonight in great detail. He retired in 2011 as a detective second grade. Of course, as you know, most of the members of ESU are detective specialists, and that is an appropriate title considering what they have to do on a day in and day out basis. And that for this volume 48 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. And our first show back in this back half of 2024 is retired NYPD detective and Emergency Service Unit member, Rich Miller. Rich, welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Thank you for being here. Good to see you too. And thank you for making the time this evening. Just a quick shout out to our friends tuning in: Christian Williams, John Costello, Christian Flood, himself a retired NYPD detective as well. Steve Irato, I'll mention you again if I haven't mentioned you already. My sister's watching as well. And of course, somebody who's still getting it done in ESU and Truck 10 as we speak, and that's Mr. Stefanakis, who's tuning in tonight as well in real time. Good to see all you guys. We love Steve, of course, very much. So before we get into everything involving your career, tell me, where did it all begin for you, Rich? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Cold Spring, New York, across the river from West Point, and I grew up in the Peekskill area mostly.
Mm-hmm. So upstate. Were you surrounded? Did you have any family in any form of civil service early on, or was it television that attracted you to the job? What was it that interested you early?
Not in service with law enforcement, but yeah, I had a lot of uncles who were Marines, Navy, Army, so it was a tough choice to make, and I chose the Marine Corps after I graduated from Walter Panis High School, actually, in Peekskill, New York.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Rich Miller here, Volume 48 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Of course, for those of you in the chat on YouTube particularly, the Super Chat is available. And if you're watching on YouTube and LinkedIn and you have a question for Rich, throw it in the chat and I'll make sure I highlight it at the appropriate time. So you said it was a tough choice for a variety of reasons, and I can imagine what those reasons were. But ultimately, what made you pick the Marines? What was it that sealed that particular deal for you?
Well, I guess, I was looking at the military police field, and I guess I just wanted to get off the streets of New York, get off the streets in Peekskill and stay out of trouble. College, I played football and lacrosse in high school, but I just wasn't my direction, and so I followed a law enforcement career in that. So that's how I started.
Yeah.
Went to Fort McClellan, Alabama for military police school. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to be able to pick, when I graduated from the school, I was in the top 10%. So I was able to pick Camp Pendleton, California, where I made my first gun collar as a 19-year-old kid.
And that's the thing. A lot of people don't understand the scope of the military police. It's an interesting subunit within a larger unit. So we'll get to that gun collar in a second. But for those that are not familiar with it, how does the military police concept work? Where can you patrol? What is the jurisdiction?
Yeah, basically, as an MP at Camp Pendleton, we have highways that run through, and long stretches of highways on the base itself. So you could be running radar. You could be doing an investigation at a crime scene. As a young MP, you could also you work the gates as well, watching cars coming in and out, checking them in, and handling the crimes in the housing areas on base as well. Some housing areas in Camp Pendleton were off base too, and we would actually have to patrol those as well. So we would work with that at that time, Oceanside PD and San Mateo PD and California Highway Patrol.
So that brings us to that first gun collar. Again, 19 years old. What's the story behind this one?
Well, I turned out a roll call for a 4 to 12, and I was assigned to Christianitas Gate, which is a one-man operation up there, in the Christianitas areas where Marine Recon are stationed, and in and out of that gate. gets pretty busy at tour change too. So we were just like in the NYPD, you're off center of the major traffic times. So when I got up there, I was at roll call. They had said they were looking for a car, and I believe it was Papa Juliet Bravo 350 was the plate number. Yellow Cutlass Supreme with a white vinyl top. And in high school, I had a 442 Oldsmobile, which was golden color, white convertible. So I knew what a Cutlass Supreme looked like. And it was a Marine sergeant and two other Marines that were going around the base picking up hitchhikers, usually on payday, and taking them off base and robbing them. So they were last seen going off base. So I was expecting if they came my way, they would be coming on base. I was doing traffic and standing out in the middle of the roadway outside the gatehouse, traffic going in and traffic going out. And I was waving, saluting the officers and waving the enlisted through if they had the proper sticker identification on their vehicle. And I saw traffic was heavy coming out. And about 4 or 5 cars back, I seen what looked like that Cutlass Supreme coming close. So I held up traffic coming in. I put my hands up traffic going out and held them all up. And then one by one, I kept moving the vehicles in and out. And until I got to like one car in front of the car I was looking at, I walked around the car that I stopped first, as if I was checking that car out. I gave no indication I was interested in the car behind him. And as I walked around, I stepped back a little bit, and the car door window was open, driver's side. I pulled my 45 out and pointed it right at him and said, "Don't move. Put your hands on the dashboard, palms facing up." And he kept saying, easy, Marine," as a sergeant would. Right? And I was pretty nervous, but I was able to, a boot lieutenant, they call it at the time, or with the butter bar lieutenant, gold bar. That's the first rank of lieutenants. Mm. And he ran up to me and says, "What do you got, Marine? What do you got, Marine?" And I said, "I think these are the guys that have been going around base robbing people." And that's when they lit up too. Like, no, that's not us. That's not us. And I said, calm down. And he said, "What do you need me to do?" And I said, "Could you run over the gate guard shack and put it over the radio that I'm seeking assistance?" Well, I don't know how he put it over, but I had assistance from San Mateo PD, California Highway Patrol, and MPs from all over the base that were on regular patrol and vehicles had responded. But by that time, I had all 3 of them laid out on the ground with the help of the young lieutenant. And that was my first gun collar.
It's quite the story, you know. And were these members of the service that were going around committing these robberies?
They were. They were. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of dishonor in that, to say the least, but good job and safe job too. And man, I'm sure that backup came quickly, but many guys have told me stories about similar stops over the years where even if it's 30 seconds that they arrive, it feels like forever. It's got to be the longest 30 seconds or minute of your life because you just don't know. And anything can happen in that period of time. But thankfully, these guys cooperated. And I guess the key is, as has been explained a lot in this program, maintain control of the situation. You maintain control of the situation, as you did, 9 times out of 10, it'll go well.
Yes.
Yeah, it certainly did there. And that brings us to an interesting transition. So 83 brings your time in the Marine Corps as a police officer, at least in the Marine Corps, to an end. And 84 is when you transition into being the bodyguard, as we mentioned in the introduction, to first the royal family of Jordan. So how does one, especially in his early 20s at that time, get a job like that? Because that's insane. I say this in a good way. That's a crazy assignment to have, especially being so young.
Yeah, it was. Best way to put it is, well, let me back it up a little bit. My first partner in NYPD, we grew up together. We were in the Marines together. We were bodyguards together. But funny story about it is, growing up, his father's brother was married to my father's sister. Growing up, we always thought we were first cousins. Until one day we're sitting in the barracks and we started talking with a bunch of other guys, and we looked at each other and, wait a minute, we're not really first cousins or blood cousins. We were just related by marriage, but we were best friends. So literally, I was just talking to a former Marine, Vietnam veteran the other day, talking about it. From the sandbox of childhood to the sandbox of the Marine Corps, we were together. And when I left the Marine Corps, he was still active for about a few more months. But after he got out, he went down for an interview with MVM International Security in DC, and he used me as a reference. And that company had State Department contracts, so they do background checks on the references as well. So being that reference, they had called me up and asked me if I was interested in the job too. And I said, only if Charlie gets hired. And they said, oh, we hired Charlie. And I said, okay. So I flew down to DC, met with them, and I flew back that night. And on my answer machine was, we hired you, and you start. They gave me a date start, and we had to go to MVM's International Executive Protection School, which was run at BSR Driver Training School in West Virginia, Summit Point, West Virginia. It was a pretty cool school to go through. Yeah, riding around a racetrack and smashing cars to avoid barricades and all kinds of other stuff. It was pretty cool. But for a young guy, it was great. When I was just about ready to complete the school, they started giving us our assignments. And I was assigned to Prince Faisal at Brown University, and he was going into his senior year. They wanted young people who, with our backgrounds, to sit in class with them if we had to, or be around them walking. So if anybody come in, they would have to pick us out of the crowd to hurt His Royal Highness Prince Faisal. So anyway, I guess so. Let me back it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Faisal was the son of King Hussein, who was the leader of the country, and brother of now King Abdullah. And there were a lot of death threats on the family because the Jordanians were one of the first countries outside of Egypt to start negotiating peace with the Israelis. So there were a lot of death threats on the family. It was a pretty serious job. I actually became very good friends with Faisal for many years, but when he had graduated Brown, I always say when I'm in a crowd of people talking, I said, "Yeah, I attended Brown University in Princeton." And people look at me and go, "Oh, you did?" I started with a senior year with Faisal at Brown, and a freshman year with his cousin Prince Ghazi. Actually, he was a sophomore. I'm sorry. Charlie was assigned to him right away, but he had only spent the first year with him. I spent the second year with him. Had a great time. Became very good friends with Ghazi, and Ghazi was actually Prince of the Tribes, King Hussein's nephew. So good friend to have for quite a while. So yeah, I guess that in itself. And at that time, Ghazi had asked me if I was interested in starting my own company, and I was young and I was not really interested in that, but he made me an offer, and he introduced me to the Shah's family, Ali Reza Pahlavi, Shah of Iran's son, and they liked me, so I took that as a subcontract and started a company. And I also worked for Ivan Boesky. If you're familiar with stock market, Ivan Boesky was probably the Bernie Madoff of the 80s. So I worked with all three of those contracts back in the day.
Wow. And, it has to be some form of, I've used the term culture shock a lot on this show, and I don't want to overdo it because it gets to the point of redundancy, but I really can't think of any other term because, like I said, just to go back to what I mentioned earlier, here you are in your 20s at this time, and, through watching the news over the years, we've been somewhat informed about world affairs, but it's not something that's necessarily pressing on your mind. And here you are at the forefront with someone that's deeply involved in them. Even if they're not actively involved in the day-to-day decisions of the country, their father is in this case, or in the case of Ghazi, his uncle was. So you're following them around. And, at the end of the day, when you can level with someone on a one-on-one level, you find that most of these people, no matter their backgrounds, are just normal people. Just kids going to college. It just so happens they're linked to someone very prominent. But it's quite the exposure to get.
Yeah, I did have some deep conversations with them about their world, and mostly with Ghazi, being Prince of the Tribes, and how the differences in, especially me being a Christian and him being a Muslim, and how we were able to have great, meaningful conversations. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. If I could jump ahead a little bit.
Sure, go right ahead.
So in 2003, we had we were called to do a display for a VIP dignitary coming into One Police Plaza to meet for the first time ever the head of state, to meet with Commissioner Ray Kelly and Mayor Bloomberg. So we put out the display, and when I found out who it was, I told some of the guys there. I said, "Yeah, I know Abdullah." And I got a ribbon. I don't know if I should mention their names, but John Bushing was one of them. He's a great character.
John.
He's a great guy. And I think John Scrivani and a few of the other guys were giving me a ribbon about. Miller says he knows the king. So I was just standing there, and one of the king's bodyguards, their equivalent to their Secret Service, had come over and was walking around looking at what I had on display. I had all the armory that we had from the A team, the apprehension team, and he was looking at it. And I said, well, Abdullah had come in and he did the political wave, walked right through us, and everybody just kind of stood there like that was it. So when I was talking to one of his bodyguards, I said, we're talking. I said, I was hoping to meet His Majesty because I didn't even get a chance to finish when he said, "Oh, His Majesty knows a lot about weaponry and firearms." I said, no, I understand that. He was a SF. He was their SF, went to our SF schools here in the States. And he goes, "Oh, you read about His Majesty?" I said, "Well, actually, I know His Majesty." And he said, "Really?" And he went over to another guy who happened to be the head of their security, and they both came over and said, "Could you write down your information?" So I gave it to him, and not thinking much of it. He's the king, right? So, and they were in a very important meeting. And when he went in, and then abruptly, the head of security abruptly came out, told the other guy, he came over and said, "His Majesty will see you when he comes out." I said, "Oh, wow, that's pretty cool." So after the meeting was over, the doors opened up. He came out, and he turned and he looked, and I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Hargrove. God rest his soul.
Yeah, great guy.
Peace. A great guy. He looked over at Paul and Sergeant Hargrove, and he kind of and then he looked over and he goes, "Rich." And I looked at him. I went ready to go up. "Your Majesty." It's like he gave me a great big hug right in front of Ray Kelly, and Commissioner Kelly kept looking like, "What is going on here?" And right behind him was Mayor Bloomberg, like, "What is going on here?" So we talked, and we were talking about the family and how everybody was doing, and then I took him around and introduced him to John, who. And a funny story about that was that John had shared with them Quick Clot, something that we had here that they didn't have there, and they were very interested in it. And I think that created a bit of a stir, but wanted it. And so I think that's. I didn't mean to jump ahead and make a.
No, listen, this is your story. You tell it how you see fit, as I often tell guests in this show. And for those of you that don't know, John Bushing, who's been on this program a couple times, and John Scrivani's been on too. John Bushing was a medic in ESU. He was a tactical medic in emergency service. So just as much as he knows about police work from his days in the transit rescue and ESU and the NYPD side post-merge, he's also very knowledgeable about the medicine component too. So go back and check out that interview with John if you haven't seen that one from a little while ago. And I imagine going from that to corrections in Westchester County, I mean, if you can protect someone of such prominence, like a prince or two princes in this case, as you did, then working the jails it's not to say a cakewalk completely. It still has its dangers, but it's got to be night and day compared to what you were doing before. You can handle anything after that.
Yeah, it's. I always say it's a great stepping stone in law enforcement to actually work a cell block and be responsible for so many inmates and have to deal with them on a daily basis. It prepared me for the NYPD, I think. And I wouldn't say it was a stepping stone, but when I decided to leave the bodyguard world, you're living out of a suitcase when you're in the bodyguard world. So I did want to settle down in New York, and I did want to take all the police tests. And the first one to call me was corrections. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the guys, the great guys I worked with there. My best experience there, I would say, is that I had one inmate that was he was a new guy on the block, One West, which if you knew One West, it was a one-man block that you had to work, and you had 15 on one side, 15 on the other side, and they had certain times that can only be out. They could be in the day room. So you had one side in the day room, and the other side would be locked in, locked down. this guy had come back from court, and he was a problem for a few days with me and another young officer from the day tour. I was on a 4012, sir. And so he was just a big problem. So when I came in, this officer, he said, "Hey, he made court, the Sphinx made court today. He made court today." And I said, "Really?" He said, "No, okay, that's great. That's great. So he's no longer a problem. That's great for him because he couldn't handle him." But when he came in from court later on my tour, he had a problem and started giving me a bit of a problem about, he missed the day room time. He missed this, he missed that. And he was concerned about his package out front. So I had to make my rounds and make a ring at the back end of the block. And when I came back, well, I said, "Here, just go in the day room. When it's time to get out, I'll call about your package and we'll find out where it's at." So go in the day room. I made my ring. I came to the door. I said, "Spinks, you got to come out." And apparently he was a cousin of Leon and Michael Spinks. So anyway, I brought him out onto the quarter deck, which is the front side of the cell block. Mm-hmm. And prior to bringing him out, I said to the center guy, there's a center area for transportation back and forth on inside the jail for different cell blocks. I let him know I might have a problem. So he said, "Listen, I know the guy, okay? And if you do have a problem, unlock your first door." Now that's a no-no, but he said, and he was a senior guy. He said, "Unlock it, because if the ring goes off, it's one less door that the squad to get to you. It's like their ESU interior for corrections for them to get to you. So it's one less door to get to you." So I thought, wow, that's a pretty good idea. So I went to the day room door. I unlocked the door. No, first I said, I went to the day room door. I called him out. He gave me a hard time. I said, "Listen, I got a call out front about your package." Came to the door, came out, and was standing there. And I called out front to another guy. His name was Jim Sewell. He was booking. And I said, "Hey, Jim, I got a guy here. He says he's got a package from his girlfriend." And he looked. He said, "No, he doesn't have it." I said, "Okay, so it's going to be a problem, I guess." Right. So I said, "All right, I hung up the phone. I said, "All right, I'll call you back. Double check." Okay, I hung up the phone. So I knew it was going to be a problem. So I unlocked the door. Well, first I picked up the phone again. We talked a little bit. He goes, "I know my package is there." I picked up the phone and I called back out front. And Jim says, "Hey, Rich, look, I got him busy here. He doesn't have a package." I said, "All right." So I put the phone up on top without hanging it up. And that's a signal that it goes to and lets them know that there's a problem. And then I unlocked the door and I said, "Hey, sorry, Spinks, you don't have a package." And back then they used to do this a lot with the fingers, stick it in your face like this. Well, he went up like this to stick his finger in my face. And just as he did this right into my face, I hit him. We went down and we rolled for a good period. And then at that time, all the inmates ran to the day room door. And there's only a little port window, and they're all yelling, "Get him, Miller! Get him, Miller!" They were on my side because he was really a hard problem for them. Yeah, they were all yelling, "C.O. Miller, get him! C.O. Miller, get him! C.O. Miller!" So they were on my side, most of them. And finally got them under control, but the squad had come in, and by that time the two of us were in pretty bad shape. It was a good roll around for a while until they got there, and so they leave. They take him off, and he's got to go down to the medical block to be seen. And the captain, who's I can't remember his name now, sat me down and he said, "Look, you're new here. If I take you out of here and take you to the hospital, which I think you need to do," because I was bloody nose, my rear ear was ripped, and he said, "If I take you out of here, bring you to the hospital, it's a draw. You finish your tour tonight on this block. This is your block." And sure enough, until I left, One West was my block.
Man, and that sets the tone. That sets the tone right there, because they're looking to see. I mean, these prisoners, they're in prison for a reason. It's not because they're nice guys.
For weaknesses. Yeah,
exactly.
And if you give them weakness, they'll take advantage of it. It'll open the door for them to take advantage of it.
one of the things I want to do is I got to get in touch with some corrections ESU guys, because I was having this conversation down at Floyd Bennett with Joe Whittleter, who I'm trying to get on the show, by the way. Joe, you should come on already. I say that with love, of course.
Great
Joe's
guy.
man. Yeah, worked in
Great guy.
Truck primarily during the course of his ESU career. But as he brought out a good point, and Brian Wall mentioned this too, it's hand-to-hand combat in corrections
Yeah.
ESU, because those cell extractions are not easy. You're dealing with the epitome of violent, volatile people who obviously are in prison for a reason. So shout out to all the corrections ESU guys. I don't know how they do it, but man, do they put in the work.
Oh yeah, and that tactic of pointing in your face, they use that to poke you in the eye first before they hit you. Come up with the left or right hand.
Disorient you, yeah.
Yeah, disorient.
So. And who knows what could happen from there. So you did that for a year, and as you said, it was a stepping stone. So you go into the NYPD in 1988. And I always like asking, this is kind of a staple anytime I get a police guest on that came on pre-merge. At that time, obviously, they would tell you where you were going to go, either if it was going to be the city, housing, or transit. Did you have a preference, or did you not care as long as you were a cop in New York City?
I don't think I cared. Yeah, I did want to be a New York City police officer. It was when I decided I wanted to be in law enforcement as a career. I kept channeling my mind to that's where I wanted to be. I was stationed in Pendleton, California. LA was an option. I was stationed in Hawaii. HPD, Honolulu PD would have been great, but I wanted NYPD if I was going to be a police officer.
Right, it is the pinnacle, and you got there in 1988. Now, going to the academy, it's not a walk in the park, but obviously with your background having gone through the Marine Corps, it's a lot easier, and they often look for that, guys who are squared away from a prior background in service, which have obviously. Go ahead.
I was a company sergeant, and I had one of, if I can take a moment on that.
Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, there was an officer who was a recruit who was hired by Transit PD, and well, anyway, he was a problem child from the beginning, and I always thought maybe it was a language barrier. So I asked one of the other guys, Tony Diaz, as a matter of fact, a very good officer in OCCB, and later in OCCB, was with me in the squad in my platoon, and I asked, could you help him out? And I asked a couple other guys too, and they said, we've tried, and he just won't, So he was failing a lot of courses, but for some reason they were hanging on to him. I think he had a family member on the job as well. But he was just a big problem. And my assistant company sergeant, Danny Valenti, I had to run, as a company sergeant, you run the 610, you got to do a lot of administrative stuff, go up and meet with the big bosses. And we were out at the range one day, and I had to run over to their equivalent of 610 in the academy for admin stuff. And when I came back, Danny Valenti, he was looking at me, he was like, "Why does it ghost?" And I said, "Well, what's the matter?" And he said, Eric was threatening me. And I said, "Oh, come on, man, really?" And yeah, he threatened me. I said, "Well, why did he threaten you?" He said, "Well, I said, hey, everybody's picking up brass. Why don't you help?" And he threatened him. So I walked over to Eric and I said, "Hey, Eric, listen, we're a team here. And we're trying to get everybody through the academy, together." So, and then he threatened me. And at that time I was like, wow, I'll go back to corrections. I don't, you're not going to threaten me. And we squared it away. But so when we got from the range back to the academy, I was sitting in class, and it's a busy job being the company sergeant. So if there's a problem with another recruit, sometimes you have to go up to the 610 with them to see the lieutenant up there. Well, anyway, I got told I got to go to 610 and see Lieutenant Geisen. I said, "Oh man!" So I went up there, and he said, "I want you to go down the hall, and you're going to meet with Transit." And I said, "Oh, Transit? Why Transit?" Well, he just sent me down the hall, and I had to stand in front of the door at Transit. And I thought, well, maybe they're switching me over to Transit or something. I don't know, or maybe I'm being assigned Transit. And I stood there for a bit, and they called me in, and there was a sergeant there, Transit sergeant. And he asked me about this guy, Eric. And I said, well, sir, I don't think, I'm not in a good position to give advice on this guy. because we've had a problem. And he said, yeah, you threatened him. And I said, I threatened him. I said, oh, okay. All right. So I fessed up. I said, all right. And they said, we'll deal with it. Good. So, and we'll deal with it. So I went back to Lieutenant Geisen. He said, it's a serious problem. And I said, yes, sir. They sent me back to the class. So I didn't know what was going to happen the rest of my time in the academy. And when I came in a day or two later, they brought me back upstairs to transit, and they asked me about him again. And I said, well, sir, I didn't want. I'm no rat, but I'm not gonna, I just felt like, hey, I think it was a mutual thing between the two of us. I thought I settled it well, and we left it at that. He said, all right, you're back to your class, and so apparently that was their last straw, because they had interviewed a few other people in the academy class and instructors as well, and they fired him. The problem was they couldn't find, they couldn't, he never turned in his PD ID card. So a few years later, he's gone. He's the only one I think we lost in the academy class, because we were all trying to keep everybody together and help each other out. And that was the best. I had a great company. They bought me a gun too at the end. So they were great guys, great men and women, and many of them became big bosses. Well, anyway, so fast forward a few years later, after my first shooting, I was assigned to the Borough Command for a bit. And that's when I was driving Lou Yanamone and Tommy Mullen, a few great guys, great bosses, and the phone's ringing. I pick up the phone, and I said, Police Officer Miller, Joe Bronx, and it was a news station in Maryland, and so I said, oh wow, I said, this is, and they told me what this guy claimed to be an NYPD officer, identified himself as an NYPD officer with another guy in the car. The driver identified himself, and he shot and killed the Maryland State Trooper. But before he said that, the reporter said, I said, who was the guy? But there was an incident down there. Who was the guy? And she said the name, and so I held the phone back and I said, that name's going to haunt me the rest of my career. His name was Eric Tirado. Okay, and I said, that name's going to haunt me the rest of my career. So I ran down. I said, call DCPI. And I hung up the phone. Ran downstairs to Bronx Homicide, and there was a guy down there, Benny Tirado, really great guy, great detective in homicide. So I ran in there. I said, Benny, do you guys have a guy down here by the name of Eric Tirado? Everybody was kind of like sitting back because it had been a long night for them. They all sit up in the room and go, how do you know that? And I said, was this guy ever in the NYPD? And he said, how do you know that? How do you know that? And I said, because when they interviewed me, when they were firing him, they couldn't find his ID card, and they were going to ask everybody in the class if anybody's seen the ID card. So anyway, it's a longer story, but I won't go too far into it. But he got 25 to life, I think. But,
oh God, what a shame! What a shame!
Yeah.
Throws it all. Talk about throwing it all away. God.
Yeah.
Man,
yeah.
What a jerk.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
all right, no sympathy for him. But listen.
Right.
Oh, man, just at least, and it's not good what happened later, but at least he was vetted out properly enough to where he never even got on the job. Because if that's the horror he committed off the job, imagine what he would have done with the badge and a gun and an official title. So it's scary to think. But thankfully, he was weeded out before he could even get that far. Now, transitioning into your time on patrol before we get to ESU in '93, your time on patrol primarily was in the Bronx, as you said. 4-4 precinct off the rip. Now, there are precincts to grow up in. There's a lot of busy commands throughout the city. I won't say which borough is busier over the other because it all blends together.
I will. No, I won't.
But the Bronx 4-4, talk about a learning curve. Even for someone like yourself that had the background you did to patrol those streets during that time in the late 80s, crack is around, you got dealers left and right. Talk about a street education. Tell me about those early years and who helped you grow as you were a young cop in the 4-4.
So like I said, when I got assigned to the 4-4, my first partner was Charlie Wassel. And we were in the Marines together, bodyguards together, grew up together, and patrol. And the 4-4, it was a very busy house, and we'd run neck and neck with 7.5 and the 3.4 at the time, and if you remember that back then, the 4.4 was a small command, and you could take the 4.6, the 4.2, the 4.8, and maybe even the 4.0 and plop it right in to the 7.5 or the 3.4. So per square mile, it was a pretty busy place.
Yeah.
And it was a good place to learn how to be an officer, a cop, right? And my first day on patrol, we get a call, and I was with a guy named Kevin O'Keefe, and he was a senior officer and riding around with him. This is before I became partners with Charlie. Charlie was still on midnights at that time, but I had to do my I don't remember what it was at the time. So we had a guy on the 13th floor on Concourse Village on a balcony, and we called for the issue, but it looked like he was going to go. It was an elderly man, and apparently he had cancer and he was in bad shape, and so I jumped from the balcony that I was on to his balcony, hit the ice, and slid across the ice. There was, because it was wintertime, and they had potted plants on the balcony, and I guess water had gotten, it was pretty icy. So when I hit, I just skidded across. I was able to grab him by the legs, pant legs and leg, and I just held on until Kevin jumped. And Nicky Demure was a sergeant at the time. And he said, I'm writing that up. And I didn't even know what a write-up was pretty much at that time, because I never, other than, FTU, I knew what a medal meant, but it was good to know a boss was going to write up your medal for you. But so anyway, that was the first medal I got in the NYPD, first day on patrol.
And that's the thing that, not to gloss over that, it was the first day. And again, there are certain guys on both the FD and the PD side are just the magnets for jobs like that. It seems like you were a magnet for all the big ones or notable ones throughout your career. Because
Black Cloud.
Well, we'll look on the positive side of it. But my goodness, the first day, had gone through the academy already, and you'd gotten out of the. I think by this time, in 1988, had they done away with NSU? Was it more FTU by this time?
Yeah, it was FTU, Field Training Unit. I was in Field Training. Yeah, FTU 9. That's where I met Steve Bonanno for the first time. I was a young rookie cop. God bless him.
Gentleman he was, yeah. I would have loved to have had him on this show. My goodness. And since you mentioned the 7.5, and there's a lot of guys that, of course, ended up in ESU from the 7.5, I have to say the rather unfortunate but nevertheless funny motto, you give us 22 minutes, we'll give you a homicide. That's how busy it was for them back then.
Oh, yeah. 7.5 was crazy. It was a crazy house,
7 Truck stomping grounds, that's for sure.
Yeah. I flew to 7 Truck quite a bit in my time.
Oh, yeah.
Great bunch of guys in that truck. Really great bunch of guys. Great cops, too. A lot of them were, working the 7.5 or around Eastern Park, all around that area.
Yeah, just not to gloss over before I continue, 7.5, you think about some of the guys that have ended up in ESU, it was kind of a great farm system, if you will, because Mike Curtin was a 7.5 guy, Dave Brink was a 7.5 guy, Joe Viciano, 7.5 guy.
Yeah, Joe.
Yep. So I think, was Ronnie Griffith a 7.5 guy too?
Pardon me?
He might have been. Ronnie Griffith, I think Ronnie Griffith might have been a 7.5 guy, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he was. Yeah. I mean, and a pause for a moment. Those 14 guys were amazing. But Mike was an awesome guy, and when I was a new guy in ESU, we were in the academy, at the same time. But he got the issue before me, and Rodney Gillis as well.
Yeah,
but they welcomed me pretty good. I got to know Mike pretty good, and I was a packer and waiver for the Oklahoma City bombing, and Paul Hargrove was the sergeant. So I was a packer and waiver for them for the team, the FEMA team, to go there. So I thought I was going because a guy named Chris Priest from Truck 4 was one of the guys, on the FEMA team at the time, and McCardle told me, John, another guy, great guy, John McCardle. He said, listen, if nobody comes from Ford Truck, you might be going. And so I was like, wow, I'm a new guy. I ran over to Mike and said, Mike, I might be going with you. He goes, oh, that's awesome. And packing through the night, I think about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, Chris Priest come walking in, and I was like, and I was glad he got to go. It was just, his to do, and I knew I'd get my chance again. You know.
Yeah, and of course those chances would come later on. I have to tell this Mike Curtin story really quick before we continue with your career that Ronnie Wasson told me when I had Inspector Wasson on the show a couple of years ago. So Ronnie was, I think,
Another
also
great guy.
yeah, another great guy, and who contributed a lot to the unit. I think he was also on the 7.5. So it was New Year's Eve, and it was right before midnight. So an unfortunate tradition in certain parts of the city is the not so savory characters in the neighborhood will fire guns off into the air as a quote unquote celebration of the new year. So they were telling all the cops in the precinct, stay inside. We don't want you getting involved in any shootings. So Mike Curtis stayed out on patrol. Ronnie was one of the guys that told him stay inside. Mike was a patrol cop at the time. This was before he got to ESU. And sure enough, he gets into a shooting. And Ronnie Watson pulls up, and as he told me, Mike had a way about him that you couldn't stay mad at him. And he just looked at him like, I thought I told you to stay in the precinct. And Mike was just like, so Mike Curtin, another magnet for big jobs. And there's a great story. We don't have time to highlight it here, but for those of you that want to look it up, just type in Mike Curtin, Oklahoma City. Great story about a recovery he was involved in while out there in the aftermath of that tragic bombing. So, getting back to, of course, your career, working the 4-4, besides all the big calls and some of the more notable calls, there is the aspect of getting to know the community, which is one of the favorite things of any officer that is actively engaged in the community. So in an area like that, you got a lot of good people too that are trying to make a living, trying to raise their families. What did you most enjoy about interacting with them?
Well, if I could back it up just a little bit, in FTU 9, I made a collar, and I went to Central Booking, and it was either take the gray sled or the bus back, and FTU 9 we turned out of the 5-2, so it was a big bus ride up the concourse, but it's I enjoyed it, and I was and at that time, young officer, you're supposed to stand on the bus, you're not supposed to sit down. So I was standing. There wasn't a lot of people on the bus, and I could have grabbed a seat, but I was standing, and I looked down, and there was this kid sitting on the bus on the ride. And he was going up the Grand Concourse most of that time. And I looked down, and I said, hey, why aren't you in school? And he goes, I quit school. And I looked down and I said, you quit school? Why? And, he gave me a reason why. And I said, that's not a good reason. I don't remember what it was at the time, but I said, I told him what happened to me. I had my dad died when I was a kid, and I was running the wrong directions, and the military was my stepping stone to go. And I thought, hey, listen, the blind ears maybe, he wasn't listening, and so I got off the bus, 194th Street, walked down to the precinct. A few weeks later, I was out front waiting to catch the bus to go to Band Post 3 at Anthony Avenue. The reason why I remember that because I did that post a lot, but I remembered, that because of the connection to this. And I'm standing out there, and a bunch of guys from my FTU, Joey Zallo, Kevin Seps, a bunch of guys, good friends later on, And this guy comes up to me, young guy, little guy. He was short, so that's why I thought he was a little kid. And he goes, Officer Miller. And I looked, and I said, yeah. And he goes, he goes, yeah. He goes, I want you to meet my mother. And I'm looking at him like, I don't quite put it all together yet. And I'm looking at him, and he says something to her in Spanish, but as he's talking to her, I go, oh, wow, okay. And he says, he comes up to me, and she took my hands, was holding my hands tight. And she says something in Spanish to him. And he goes, I joined the military. And I did what? He goes, they're going to help me get my GED. I said, oh, all right, great. Right, that's great. I was like, wow. And she was like, very happy, very happy, thanking me. And so I'm looking at it. I said, wow, that's great. And the other guys are looking. And I said, what branch of the service? And then he goes, the Army. The Army. I said, that's great. Any branch of the service is a great stepping stone, I feel. So I said goodbye, and they went down the street, and I'm standing there, and I think it was Kevin that said, I said, this. And he goes, you're not going to cry on us. And I'm looking at it. I said, no. I said, look, because they could look at me looking very sincere. And I said, no. I said, if I don't do anything the rest of my career, I got one kid off the street, just one.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah, that's police work right there.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was the same kid on the bus, right? So
yeah.
I
There's the
didn't clarify
collars.
it.
Of course, there's the collars, of course, and that's a big component of it. There's obviously the community enforcement, the community relations, but at the end of the day, it's the one-on-one.
Yeah.
That's just as much a part of the job as
Oh yeah.
anything else. That's real policing, and I feel like some of that sometimes these days, with the way the job has changed over the years, with technology and other factors too, that gets lost. So it's always great to hear stories like that. I do want to highlight, and it's amazing because you've had such an extensive career. We will get to the ESU portion of it, but these are some things I did want to touch on with you first. You had a gun arrest, obviously, before during your days as a military police officer, but there was your first shooting on the job as well, which is a
Yeah.
test of any officer's mettle. It doesn't matter what background you have. It's a position you don't want to be in, but obviously in the back of your mind, no matter where you're a cop, there's potential and it could happen. And it did happen here. So for those not familiar with the story, what was the background of your first shooting, Rich?
It could take some time. Uh,
As much as you want to share, it's up to you.
so we got a call, 1120 Clay Avenue, uh, a man banging on doors with a knife. And so Charlie and I pulled up, and I think we were 44 Charlie, and and then we heard 44 David on the back. So you don't want your backup to beat you there. So we got there pretty quickly. We were in lunchtime on 171st Street having tea. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. So tea or coffee. If you knew Charlie, he had to have his tea. So we shoot over there, and we got there around the same time as Joel Plass and Basil Fisher from 44 David, I think. And we heard loud music on the street. Now it's April, and it's a chilly night, but it's loud music. You hear it on the street. So we're like, they said they were senior guys to me. Charlie already had a year on the job before I got on, actually, and so I'm going to follow them, whatever they think. And so loud music, okay. So we go in, and I go for the stairs, and they hit the elevator. One of them hit the elevator. Come on, and we took the elevator up, and got off the elevator. It was loud music coming around the hallway. So we walked down the hallway towards 6 Charlie was the apartment number, I think. And just as Charlie goes to knock on the door, I said, wait. And he kind of looked at me funny. And Basil Fisher and I went up the stairs. I wanted to check the roof landing to make sure it was locked. It was a rookie move, but that's a smart move. Right? So I was coming down the stairs, and Charlie started knocking on the door. And the door opened up, and the guy came out with a knife, came right across Charlie's chest. He went down. Joel Plass, another officer, he went down. And I actually took Basil Fisher and pushed him out of the way, took out my .38, and I ran up and put it to his head and started yelling at him, drop the knife. And he was backing up. I was, drop the knife, right into the apartment. At the threshold of the apartment. He didn't go all the way in, but he was yelling in Spanish, and just yelling. And swinging the knife, left hand, back and forth. So at that time, Joel Plass grabbed my leg, and he's trying to climb up, and he looked like a scared rabbit. He's like, his eyes were like huge, and I'm looking down at him, and I look back, and he came back at me. And it's, boom, fired one shot, center mass, and he backed up, slammed the door shut. Charlie's on the floor and says, Richie, did you get him? I said, I don't know, but I effing pissed him off. And I started trying to kick the door, and that's when they called for the issue. Somebody called for the issue. Patrol supervisor, duty captain, and ESU. So they took me out of there. And when 44 crime got there, they said, come on, we're going to take you to the hospital. My ears were ringing. I think the other guys' ears were ringing. It's a hallway. Anyway, I went to Columbia Press with them, and I was waiting there. And I guess it took a while for ESU to get in. They weren't sure when they popped the peephole where he was. And I guess they were looking. I think they had somebody outside on the fire escape looking. They couldn't figure out where he was, banging on the door. Right? And then when they finally made entry, they didn't realize he sat down up against the door. When they made entry, that's where he was. And he died there. So at the hospital, I didn't know he was dead at that time. I was at the hospital and sitting in the room they had us in. And after we'd been checked by the doctors, or waiting to be checked by the doctors, and a guy came in. I think he was from the trauma unit, and this was written about in one of the newspapers a year later, and the reporter actually wanted to write a book about it. Then but that's another story. But, so the guy from the trauma unit asked everybody to leave the room, and Charlie stayed by the door, and the guy got like right up in my face, and I was like, what's going on? And he goes, how do you feel? And I said, I'm all right. Why? And here I'm all right. Why? And he goes, well, the guy's dead. He goes, he's dead. And I look at him like I think maybe I turned white. I don't even know. Just like the blood, running out. And I'm looking at him. And he's dead. Okay. And Charlie goes, hey guy, get out, and yanks him out of the room. Said, get out of here. All right. And that's when one of the other bosses came in and said, you don't have to talk to those guys. Not right now. So, I think that was their way of handling trauma then. I don't know. But, anyway, when I got back to the 4-4, of course, you get your rights read to you. And then, then I was still on patrol. They didn't take my gun and shield away. Okay. Because it was a perp job, right? So about a week later, I'm still on patrol, and we get another job, a robbery on 1120 Jessup. Charlie and I pull up, and we get out of the car, and guy on the sidewalk goes, hey, officer, the kid who's playing with a gun. I said, oh, hey, thanks. Right. So go to the house, and there's kids running around, and it was a robbery. Two guys were robbed. They were brothers. And the mother's there, and we're talking to the mother, and I see a portrait of a Marine on the wall. And I said, listen, your son's a Marine. I said, who's that? And they said, my son. One of the sons was a Marine. So that broke the ice to have a conversation with the mother, because they were being very evasive on everything. And we wanted to know, where the gun was, because we found out that one of the brothers had a gun, was playing with it in the yard. And that's where the shots were fired, and so accidentally shot himself.
Oh,
so their version was they got robbed, right? So anyway, Charlie and I grabbed one of the brothers, the brother that didn't shoot himself, came back from the hospital. He goes, he's dead, and we go, come on, take a ride with us. What hospital? Come on, take a ride with us. He don't want it. So we go in, we tell the mother. We just want the gun. We want the gun, and she said, it's not here. I said, okay. All right. So we take the brother, we take him to the hospital, out of the hospital. Lincoln Hospital was the hospital. We go there, and we asked the doctor if we could talk to the guy. He's on a gurney with tubes in him, right? And I said to the doctor, I said, what are his injuries? And he says, entrance wound, exit wound. So when he put the gun in his waist, he shot across and shot himself, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, well, okay. So can we talk to him? Yeah, sure. Charlie had the other brother and out in the hallway. So I leaned down and I said, hey, how's it going? And I started asking questions because, I'm the recorder. I'm taking info and getting all his information. I said, give me a description of the guy again. Different than the brother's description. So I didn't tell him that, right? So I said, okay, I got another question. Just one more question. What'd you do with your gun? And he goes, my gun. And his eyes lit up. He got mad. He started pulling things out and jumping. He was like an EDP. Mostly started running around the emergency room. And the doctor's mad at me. And Charlie goes, come on, we're out of here. Get out. Now, this is a week after the shooting. So we get back to the 4-4 and got all my paperwork. And the sergeant, John Walsh was his name, Sergeant John Walsh. He goes, hey, Richie, you got a phone call. The borough's on the line. I said, oh, all right. I pick up the phone, and I right away I'm saying, hey, it's not a robbery, because I'm thinking it's RIP unit, robbery, Bronx robbery. And the guy goes, who is this? I said, Officer Miller. He goes, what the F are you doing on the street? I'm like, oh. I said, excuse me? What are you doing on the street? I said, again, I'm in 4-4 Charlie. Where am I supposed to be, sir? And he goes, I said, who's this? And he goes, Inspector Gonzalez. Iman Gonzalez, a great guy, though. Great guy. Yeah, he was a former Marine, too. And So anyway, he gave me a chewing, and he slammed the phone down. So, okay, and then there are other guys on the desk. They could hear him screaming through the phone at me. And Walsh goes, man, it was. I said, there was some inspector. I don't know why I was on the street. So anyway, do what I had to do. The next day I go in. We go out on patrol again. We get called back into the house, and I walk in, and they said, Miller, you're going to the borough. And I go, all right. I think I'm doing a mail run to the borough. And I go, all right, what do you want me to get? Anybody need anything from the borough? Right? And they're like, no, you're going to the borough. So a week later, I was taken out of the command. They didn't want me to be on patrol, but they never took my gun and shield away. And they reclassified the job as a man with a knife, EDP with a knife. And at that time, it was only 3 years after Eleanor bumpers. So they're still reinventing, the procedures to handle emotions toward people. And anyway, am I going on too much about this?
No, like I said, my job is to let you tell your story. You talk as much as you want to.
All right. So anyway, it turned out it was Rob Johnson, D.A. Johnson's first homicide by cop, and I was a young Robert Johnson. Yeah. I was young. I was a young rookie police officer, right? So and it took 4 months to go to grand jury. It wasn't easy. It was a long wait. I felt like I went from hero to zero, overnight, right? And I got to tell you that it wasn't the stress of the shooting itself. It was the stress of how I was being handled by the city, not the guys I worked with, because in my raw lockers at that time, 9 guys were involved in shootings, serious shootings, and each one of them would come up to me, and for that week, the first week I was after the shooting, and say, hey, you need anybody to talk to? You know who to talk to? And great support, great bunch of guys. It was a great command. And anyway, so here I am at this borough command, and they didn't know what to do with me. So for like the first 2 weeks, I kind of sat in a corner, and Lieutenant Redmond, who was the admin lieutenant, said, don't talk to anybody, and I'll make sure nobody talks to you. Just go ahead and get a paper or something. So for like 2 weeks, I had a bunch of papers. I read papers and do anything. I come back over to Lieutenant, you want me to help out with phones or something? I feel like I'm useless, right? And Lieutenant Kiley, the other lieutenant, we'll figure something out for him. And so Sergeant Menke, Ray Redmond, they finally said, okay, we got something for you. You want to do something? You work the wheel. I'm like, what the heck is a wheel? So, and that's the phones. All right. So that's how I was able to take that call about that shooting down in Maryland. So anyway, at that time they were doing Operation All Out. So for me, I was able to take all the old timers, Operation All Out, and my post at that time for almost 3 years was post 23 on 187th Street from Belmont to Lorillard. I knew everybody in the Little Bronx as the on that post. I would do that in Tremont. I think it was post 3 on Tremont. For the old timers that didn't want to do patrol, said, you do my job here, and I'll go out and do your patrol day. And that's how it was. And Anamon would see me going out, and he goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "Going out. I got to go out patrol, sir." And he goes, "Come on, you drive me," because he was a new inspector in the Bronx at the time. He wasn't familiar with the Bronx. So I drove him for that. I drove him for Rikers Island riots. I drove him for Crown Heights riots. And I had a good time with him. He was a great man, Louis Anamon. Well, anyway, and then the following year, I actually drove Tommy Mullen, who took Anamon's spot when Anamon got promoted from Crown Heights. That was his rising star.
Yep.
He did a great job, and I'd like to say I helped him, because I was on foot with him quite a bit. First meeting at Crown Heights, when Ray Kelly in the meeting, Commissioner Brown was not in town, so Ray Kelly was
Out of town Brown, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I wasn't going to say that, but I basically sat in that meeting, and listened to what was going on, and they gave Louis Anamon the marching orders, take back the streets. So we go outside and we go to the car, And he goes, get your helmet on and get your nightstick. And he grabbed me by the chin strap and he said, nobody lays a hand on you. I said, yes, sir. And yeah, it was there's a lot more to that story, but I'll maybe save it for another day, I guess. But we
Got to do a whole show on that because I've had Chief Animo on the program a couple of times, and he's a friend. And
he's
my
awesome.
goodness, he is, and that he was SOD chief actually for a little bit before he continued on up to chief of patrol, then chief of department. But that, yeah, you're right. That was kind of the seminal moment in his career. He was a 3-2 guy in Harlem for a long time.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's why he wasn't so familiar with the Bronx, and you know, a great guy, a great boss. But can I add this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So on our way out there, I'm driving and through Eastern Parkway and out to where the temporary headquarters was, and running down the street as a kid, and he goes, stop that guy, get that guy, because if you were Chief Inspector Animo, somebody, he was not afraid to step out of the car and make a collar,
Yeah.
or so anyway, I jump out of the car and I chase this kid for about 2 or 3 blocks. I chase this kid, tackle him, and Inspector Animo pulls up in the car, slams on the brakes, jumps out of the car, right? And that shop owner comes up and he comes running up. And that's him, right? So I go, what did he do? I got him in cuffs now. So he goes, he stole an orange. I look at the guy, orange, and I look at Inspector Animo and he goes, put him in the car. I'm trying to say, Inspector, wait, Inspector, wait a minute, because we got to go to Crown Heights. We got to go, right? So we take the guy into the 7-1. He's in my cuffs, and I'm standing there in front of the desk, and it's a madhouse because of Crown Heights.
Oh yeah,
what's going on? It's a madhouse, right? So I'm standing now. I got a collar. What am I doing? I'm not his driver now. We just got out here, and so he goes, get rid of this. I said, Inspector, I can't. He's got my cuffs on him. So, and I'm waiting for the desk sergeant, you know, so anyway, he goes, officer. He points to some officer who with his hats and bat, you know, going out to Crown Heights, you know, join everybody else, right? And he goes, officer, come here. This is your collar. And I'm like, I'm going to sign it to you. And I'm like, okay, that's great, you know. So we switch cuffs, right? And he goes, what do you do? I said, he stole an orange. And the guy looks at me. He's a 7-1 cop, right? And he's like, an orange? I said, 343, do whatever you got to do with it. I got to go with the inspector. Take care. And out the door we went. So that first night, 83 collars were made. 87 collars were made. 83 of those collars, Inspector Animo put his hands on it, assigning collars, grabbing a guy, saying, here, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours. Because guys weren't making collars because it's been going on for 3 days. You know, and they, you know, and they really didn't, they wanted them to vent, to get it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's something.
And that was the instructions, let them vent. So cops were like, okay. And a lot of these cops were out of borough guys, you know, and especially the group that we had that were assigned to Inspector Animo, you know, so we were like a rapid mobilization team to take back and get rid of the crowd, right? So it was, he was frustrated, annoyed, and on the way back to the Bronx after it was over with, you know, or maybe it was the next morning. I'm trying to remember now. So, you know, yeah, it might have been the next morning on our way out. Well, anyway, we're driving, and he goes, I don't know what's going on with these cops. Why they won't put their hands on them? And I said, well, Inspector, you remember that guy I grabbed with the orange? He said, you know, I was stuck with a collar out here. Now, being stuck with a collar out here in the 7-1, I got to figure out, I got to take this guy to central booking. Where do I go? I know the Bronx. Why am I calling it Bronx? I'm going, I'm a young rookie cop. I know where I'm going. I still know where I'm going. I'm going to Bronx central booking, criminal court. Right? And I know how to get back from there. But as a young cop, I make a collar out in Brooklyn. I don't want to make a collar out there. So it was frustrating until he come up with the idea, assigning collars and having a grab. We grab them, and we have other guys process. Grab them, process. Give it to a guy to process. And we took the bite out of that crowd quick with that.
That was
And Bill Bratton gave the transit mobile processing buses. I forget what they were.
mobile arrest center.
Yeah. So and that's how you took the bite of the crowd. So a year later, I'm still, I wanted to go out on patrol. Washington Heights is kicked up, and I wanted to go out on patrol, and the TV was on, and I was watching, and Tommy Mullen comes running down the hall, getting ready, and he goes to me, "You, Rich, come here. You do for me what you did for Lou in a moment." I said, "Yes, I'm going there." So I drove Tommy Mullen for Washington Heights riots, and there's some funny stories there. But unfortunately, there was a lot of damage that was done, and it had to settle out. But
yeah, those were two back-to-back situations in the city where tensions were high. Tensions were very high, and it was different incidents. One was a shooting. Mike O'Keefe, who's a friend of the program, I'll try to get Mike on.
Oh, Mike O'Keefe, yeah,
good guy. Wrote a lot of books. Prolific author. Shoots Kiko Garcia justifiably because Kiko was trying to kill him. Kiko tried to shoot him. Kiko lost that battle, and I believe there was tensions between the Jewish community and the Black community in the case of the
Gavin Cato being run
over. Washington Heights in 1992. Which there is a great, for those of you who are Law and Order fans, a great episode, season 4. Briscoe and Logan investigate the case in that particular episode. It's called Sanctuary. It's one of the greatest episodes in the history of the series. So I had to throw a little anecdote, which is based on the Washington Heights riots of 1992. So that brings us to 93 and going to ESU, which kind of seems like a natural fit at this point because you've done a lot, obviously, going back to the Corps. You had the bodyguard experience. You were a busy cop on patrol. ESU is usually looking for busy cops and cops that, of course, have a good reputation in addition with enough time on patrol. That is, you got to have at least 5 years on patrol before you can apply for emergency service. So getting into a unit like that, a lot of guys, after going through the STS, of course, a lot of guys to learn from, a lot of things to learn just about the special operations component of the NYPD. So tell me about first putting in the application, what your STS was like, and the first truck you were assigned to.
Well, originally when I first got on the NYPD, I wanted to go to Intel because when I was a bodyguard with the royal family, when we came into Manhattan, not only did we have Secret Service, State Department handling the upper echelon of the family. Okay, we were the private contractors that handled it, through the security company that had the project. We handled it, but we would work side by side with guys from Intel in the motorcades and whatnot. And I got to Benny Colón was his name. He worked in the mayor's office. I got to know him pretty good, doing that job. So, and he said, "You ever come on the NYPD? You look me up." He gave me his card. I hung on to that. So after my first shooting, I was looking maybe to go to Intel, and I reached out to Benny Colón and told him who I was and how, and he goes, yeah, and hey, this is a route to go. This is great. It's a great job, And well, anyway, as time went on, though, after being in the 4-4, I started looking at ESU as an option that I really liked. That I just saw how professional the guys were and how the type of work they did, and I felt like that was up my alley. And so I applied my 4th year on the job because they told me it would take about a year. And by my 5th year, I was in the class, March of '93. And I guess that's it, the history. I got into the issue, right? And after doing the shotgun, course, the swim test, and what we had to do back then to get in.
Yeah, this was a sweet spot, I think, as I've highlighted before in the history of emergency service. This was right before that merger. So this is, as I covered before, right before you get all the guys from Transit Rescue who knew the subways really well. Housing Rescue was just starting up around this time too. It wasn't around too long, but those guys they knew the projects very well from their time as housing cops.
Oh yeah.
Which included Steve Stefanakis, by the way. So
Steve's a great guy.
Great guy. And like we said, still getting it done. The last guy that's still on the job from Housing Rescue. So when he retires in the year 3000, that will end that chapter officially.
Yeah. I just seen Steve at Tony Otero's wedding.
Tony got married? I didn't know Tony got married.
I don't know if I was supposed to say that.
Okay, well, that's okay. Congratulations to Tony, though. Tony's a good guy.
My wife says I'm in trouble.
I'll have to text Tony. I love him. He's a good dude. He's been in ESU quite a long time as well. But and by the way, a shout out to Mrs. Miller, who has been key in organizing this podcast. You hear her in the background. Teresa Miller, of course, who's done a great job helping me put all this together, getting me Rich's timeline. So behind every great man is a great woman, and that is certainly the case for Mrs. Teresa Miller. And a big shout out to her. So with that in mind, within a year, you know,
can you check that from the record?
It's live.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all. It's okay. It's all good. Don't worry about it. But within the first year, before I get to some of the jobs that you had in that 94, 95 period, which truck did you go to out of the STS? Where were you assigned initially?
Truck 4.
Okay, Bronx.
Got
it.
Yeah, I picked to go to Truck 4. I wound up there in 2nd Squad. There's a great bunch of guys there.
Who was your sergeant originally?
Originally, Sergeant Larry Colora.
Okay, I've heard that name. Yeah, a lot of good things about him.
And Tommy Flannery, great guy. Richie Grasso. Jimmy Edelstein. Rob Johnson.
Yep.
And, trying to think there. Joe Briggs. Very knowledgeable guy, Joe.
Yeah.
Very knowledgeable.
A lot to learn from Ford Truck's. And Ford Truck's area is unique because you have not only the northern end of the Bronx, but if need be, because you're so close to Yonkers, sometimes if Yonkers police needs you on a mutual aid, there's instances where if the job's right at the border, you can kind of help them out if it's a particularly big job like an MVA or something, because they have their own emergency service unit as well. But, you know, sometimes they'll need you guys too. So you got an interesting slice up there. And that's not to say that 3 Truck doesn't have their hands full, obviously, working in the South Bronx you're going to.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of people sleep on 4 Truck. But no, 4 Truck is just as busy. And within that first year, you did 2 things. Now, one of them actually answers a question in the chat. So Joe Maliga, who's a friend of the program, and a very loyal viewer. He's a retired correctional officer. He always asks anytime I have a police or fire guest on, did they ever deliver a baby? Well, Joe, we don't have to wonder if that was the case, because before I get to the jumper job, he delivered a baby in the Bronx during a parole officer meeting.
Yeah, Joe and I, he was my partner, my first partner in the issue, and we responded to a job on 161st Street. The parole office was on the 9th floor. There was an issue with the elevator too, so it was kind of hit and miss if the elevator was going to work. And we got up to the 9th floor, and they said this lady's going to have a baby, and she was a big woman, right? And her husband was like maybe 5'2", 5'3", short, and she was probably about 5'9", 5'10". Okay. But she was big, so anyway, Joe and I were like, we had. I think we brought the backboard up in the EMT kit, and she's saying, oh, and she had another one with her too, but I don't remember who that was. But she was like, oh, and Joe and I go, holy cow, the water broke. Oh God. So what do we do? This is, we know what we're supposed to do, but both of us, it's our first, right? So, and at that time we were expecting, I think my daughter Christy at the time. And so anyway, we help her to the floor, and I'm asking her a lot of questions. I'm the recorder. Joe was the driver, right? And chauffeur, and here I am, writing, paper. I'm asking her questions, and finally get to the question: "Is your first baby?" Yes, it's my first baby. So I said, "Okay, all right." I got all my paperwork. Get her legs up. Right, it's coming. Baby's coming. Crowning, everything. So we get ready. Like a football in my hands. I played football, and that baby came out so fast. There wasn't much we had to do. There it was. The baby's in my arms. And Joe and I, at that time, the EMTs from EMS would come in, and we're like, thank God you guys are here. So I got to cut the cord. So anyway, now that it's their responsibility now. Then we're going to help them bring her down. And if there's an issue with the elevator, we may have to carry her all the way down. So Joe and I and EMTs were. EMS was I keep saying EMTs, we were EMTs, but EMS was, we're getting her, we were able to get her on the elevator, but the elevator kept missing the floor, like half, some up, some down. So,
That doesn't help.
and unfortunately, that security officer that was helping us, 2 weeks later, had his head cut off by that elevator.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
it's a tragic story. Yeah, we told him, you got to get, well, anyway, we got her on the elevator, got her down the ground floor. We're getting her in the bus, and now EMS is asking their questions, right? And the husband's there. I think he was the husband, but he was the father. So we're standing around the bus, loading her in. EMS is asking their questions, and the EMS worker says, "So your first baby?" She goes, "No, it's my seventh baby." And I go, "No." So, no, she goes, "Yeah, no, it's my first baby." So I said, no, she said seventh baby. My wife, because she's heard the story a few times, so she's like, no. I said,
My first baby.
I go, seven? And she goes, I thought you said it was your first baby. And she goes, it's my first baby with him. And Joe and I stood there like, wow, that's why I came out, I guess, like a football.
Yeah, there you go.
And so anyway,
Touchdown.
yeah. So now she's asking what our names are, and I said my name's Rich, and she asked the other two EMS guys their names, and she didn't like their names, and so she asked Joe. This is a funny story. So Joe, Joe's not answering her. So I said, Joe, and she's looking at me, Joe, and I said Joseph, and she goes, oh, I like that name. So we load her in the bus. We get into the REP, and Joe gives me a hard time. What? Why? Why'd you have to? Because I said, what's the matter, Joe? And he goes, because I want my son to be. I said, she said she didn't like Rich. So, what was I going to do? So Joe sounded like a nice name, so anyway, I just had to be there. And Joe's, I said, but Joe, there's plenty of Joes in the world. and now we happy. There's a young Joe.
Inspired directly by that particular Joe. And I say this with love because, of course, I love my mother very much. But when I see, especially now as I try to carve out a career in the emergency response field myself, what women have to go through with pregnancy and that particular final process, I am very glad I'm not a woman because I could never handle that, and I don't know how they do. And my friend Nicole Wirch, who's a loyal viewer of this program, Nicole, you have a son, so you went through that process yourself. Hats off to you, and to my mother who will watch this later. I'm sorry about that because, good Lord, does that sound painful. 9 months, and then that process of having to actually, no, you have to come out now. Oh boy! Shout out to all the mothers out there who've had to do that. Now, this is an interesting question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I got to say, I was blessed to have that opportunity, right? Because the city worked in the city, right? And I actually cut the cord for all three of my children. So
there you go.
It's a blessing, right?
It certainly is, and amen to that. Now, this is an interesting question that Steve Iorato in the chat brings up. And it's good to see you, Steve, as always. And it's something that I guess we can go back to not gloss over it. You came into emergency service right after the World Trade Center bombing in 1993. So obviously ESU is always on alert as it is, especially when it comes to landmarks within the 5 boroughs. But after a major incident like this, I wonder, what was it like for you early on being in ESU directly after a job that changed the way ESU would operate forever?
Well, in fairness, I say this, that for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, I was actually coming back from Brooklyn driving Chief Thomas Gallagher, great man. When it happened, he said, "Go," and we went, and we didn't do much, but being there, just whatever we could, just stand around pretty much, but we helped some people across the street about it. That's about the most of it, right? And but I watched what was going on with ESU and guys that were working that day, and was really impressed that I was soon to be going there. And I got to tell you, I was blessed with a great career, but I was also blessed to work with such great men and women from that unit, and that was a great, I say, inspiration before I went into the unit, to see them in that kind of work.
Absolutely.
In motion. Obviously, I didn't go down in where they going, but just see them in motion, with the determination to get in there, and help.
Yeah, did a great job under some
Yeah,
very difficult circumstances. Shout out to them. Transit Rescue, which responded. I know that from talking with Joe Said and Franco Baraducci, and also of Port Authority Police Emergency Service Unit. I'm not sure if they existed around that time, but the Port Authority Police nevertheless did a great job, in particular with that operation as well. Now, jumper jobs are not, and I do want to get to Freddie's Fashion Mart in 1995, which happened in two trucks areas in a
yeah,
moment. But jumper jobs are not easy to deal with just because of the precariousness of it, especially if they're up on a bridge or any kind of high point. And obviously,
yeah.
you're walking into a volatile situation where no matter what it is, something has pushed that person to the edge. And it's your job, literally and figuratively, it's your job to bring them back. Now, in
Yeah.
this instance, it's especially challenging because this person is deaf. Now,
Oh,
unless in general you're a sign language expert,
yeah.
it's very difficult to communicate with this person. So, tell me about this job and ultimately how you were able to end it peaceably.
You and my wife did your homework, right? That's that job, right? Uh, actually, uh, well, we got a call, man on the roof, and he was deaf, and it was just off of Third Avenue down in the 4-2, top of one of the housing projects there, right? And I forget what PSA. Well, yeah, PSA 7, I think it was. Officer that was on the roof with us was there, and she was making headway with it a little bit, and Doug Bertram was my basically I would say Doug was like a TPO training officer. He was great, man, very knowledgeable. He left early from the NYPD to go upstate and work for a department up there, and but he was a great man to learn from. And Doug tied me in, and I got close to approach and to try to engage in conversation, and I was making it nowhere. I'm getting nowhere with it. And what I didn't know was there was actually Fox News was trying to set up on another roof somewhere to watch, and so like I had an idea, and I went, "Hi," I wrote on my hand, "I want to help." And so it kind of broke the ice, and that was the best I could do: spit on my hand, wipe it, right, and try again. To get closer, but I kept writing smaller. And as I got closer, he was writing small. He kept leaning back to read what I was going, and I was able to make the grab. Right? Apparently, Fox liked what happened, and the next day, well, that night, we got a phone call at home, and Doug called me and says, "Are we going to go?" I said, "Are we going to go? I don't know. What do we do?" And I said, "Well, Desk is telling us, we got to be at Fox 5 Studios early in the morning with Lynn White." And I was like, "Really?" And if you watched Fox News back then with Lynn White, very pretty woman, and she wore short skirts. But so we were told we got to be down there, and so they were actually going to send a car up to Ford Truck to pick us up, but we said we'd go down. We were going to we'd be in uniform, so we drove down the REP, and so we get at the studio, and they put us in the green room. And very little prep. We got to be out there when we get called out there. And there was a famous aerobics woman. What was her name now? Anyway, with another woman there, and they were gonna be on before us, or no, after us. They were gonna be on after us. And we're in the green room talking to them, and the guy comes in to get us to bring us out there, but we're doing aerobics with her in the green room. The other, me and Doug. And they come in. What are you doing? And they said, "We're doing aerobics with her." So they usher us into the studio, and we're kind of like elbowing each other. Who's going to sit next to Lynn White? And I was in kind of like dumbstruck or in awe that here I am, right? And Doug sat between me and Lynn White, and anyway. She was interviewing Doug, and Doug very professionally explained what we do, and asked me a couple of questions here and there, but then she goes, but I was really quiet and nervous, but I was looking around, and when she said, "And you were talking to him, doing sign language," I looked at her like, "No, not really." I said I was writing on my hand and spitting on my hand and wiping it. You should have seen the jaw drop on her and probably everybody else. That's how we made communication. It's a funny story, I guess. So, but but then she said, how does a guy, when with what makes you what compels you to do that? And I said, well, compassion overcomes the fear. And when I said that, I looked at the camera. I couldn't believe I said that because I got quite a ribbon from a lot of the guys in the SU about compassion overcomes the fear. But it's the truth.
It is. It is. And it segues perfectly into what Steve wrote in the chat. He says, we are blessed, brother. And indeed, and such is the case, especially with some of the jobs like that turn out well. They're tricky situations, but thankfully they didn't turn into tragic situations. And it's definitely an uplifting job and an uplifting story. And thank you for sharing that. 1995. Now, Sam Katz wrote 2 books on the ESU. The second one is more picture-oriented, or the first one is more picture-oriented, I should say. The second one, he makes a reference to this because he had spent 1997 with 2 Truck, but he did a callback in one of the chapters to 1995. Now, for context, and Billy Ryan's in the chat, he was a detective in an arson explosion at the time, and he remembers this case very well. There had been racial tensions in the area. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, but it was racial tensions in the area. There'd been a lot of really very charged rhetoric that was being said in the lead-ups to this. So there's always the chance that someone who's already unstable and off-kilter as it is going to take it a step or 5 overboard. And that's exactly what happened when an individual went into Freddy's Fashion Mart, started shooting, and then in addition to starting the shooting in that store, lit it up on fire. So this happened in 2 Trucks area. 1 truck came down to assist at the time. This was really an all-hands job. FD was there because there's fire involved. Numerous people were killed. This was in December of 95. Really just a wild and very tragic job. So I never knew you were there. And I've had a few guys on who were there when it went down. I think Seth Garr told the story about it too. So that day, from your perspective, December.
Another great man, Seth.
Very good guy. What, from your vantage point, what happened that day at Freddy's?
So my partner Joe and I, we were somewhere near Fordham Road, I think, the 5246, right on the border there, around that area. When we heard Seth on the radio, putting it over, couldn't make out exactly what he had said, where it was at that time. So Joe and I shot down down the D into 155, and took 155 in because we knew it was south of where we were at for some reason, and until we can clarify exactly where it was at. But we could have gotten anywhere in 2 Truck in the center of 2 Truck's area of responsibility. So it made sense to shoot for that and get in. And then once we clarified where we were at, where we had to go, I think we were like one of the first REPs outside of 2 Truck area to be there. And Joe and I, as a bunker team, I had a shotgun and Joe had the bunker. We're on one side of the store while Seth and Henry Medina were on the other side of the store. And we knew that Ann and Pete were in the back with other people, to help get people out. But he was still shooting. And FD was there, and they had a charged line. And so the fire lieutenant said, we're gonna make entry. And we were kind of holding them back a bit because it was still shots fired at the time. And I couldn't make out where they were coming from. I had the shotgun up, and he said, the fire lieutenant said, we're gonna go. I said, then I'm going with you, because what happened was the perpetrator he had lit the front of the building on fire, and it was a clothing store. There were a lot of back then. Remember the old puffy jackets and whatnot?
Yep.
They were nylon.
Back then, yeah, it was the 90s.
Yeah. So that was when the fire started. It actually just took off like fuel, and maybe Seth can explain it better. But the lieutenant says we're going. So I said I'm going with you. He goes, well, then make sure my guys don't get shot. So we were their protection to go in and start putting out the fire. But by that time, the fire lieutenant said, nobody can survive this right now up here unless the people downstairs. Right? But so pushed forward, but Pete and Ann, they did a great job in the back helping getting people out. I believe it was like 6 people, including the perp, died in that fire.
Yeah. No. And and that was one of the jobs where, again, a certain individual by the name of Mr. Sharpton, without going into the details of it, was
Yeah.
involved in that with some of the things that he was saying at the time. And it's just, the sad part is most of the victims in that job died from smoke inhalation.
Yeah.
A combination of the shots too, but some of these victims were killed not even by the gun or by the flames. Some of them were in the back and they died of smoke. So just a
Yeah. Yeah.
very avoidable tragedy. And I remember, and I know this from interviewing both enough PD and FD guys. It's interesting. Safer was kind of who ended up becoming the police commissioner a few months after this. He was kind of ticked off, if I remember at the time, because he was wondering why ESU had tanker truck, and not a big tanker truck, but some truck with water in it, or wanted a truck with water in it for future emergencies like this. Because the philosophy was, if there's a situation where you have a perp in there who's shooting, we're not trying to be the fire department, but we can at least douse it with water, take care of two problems at once. That way, when FD does make entry, it's safer for them and they don't get hurt. So they requested that. Commissioner Safer, who was fire commissioner at the time, was not too happy about it. But I think once he became police commissioner, which he did a great job as, he began to at least understand a little bit better. So, but
Yeah.
definitely a job that changed things as well. And it gets forgotten about because of a lot of other things that happened in the 90s, but that was a big one. Freddy's Fashion
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
95.
Yeah. God rest his soul. I had the opportunity to spend time with him and his wife Carol, Teresa, and I. But
Yeah.
he did. He had. I remember him mentioning that job when before he'd taken over. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a lovely guy. I had the chance to have him on the show as well. What a great guy. And again, a heck of a police commissioner and fire commissioner. Did both very well. 1996, a few months after this, March, Michael Fry is a police officer at Eastchester
Yeah. Yeah.
and he responds to a call. I believe it was a shots fired call, and he had not even gotten out of his patrol car when a
Yeah.
sniper opened fire and killed him.
Yeah.
Wounded his partner and killed him. A standoff ensued. I
Yeah.
believe this was right by Queens, or
No,
was it
no, it was up
by the
in
Bronx?
Eastchester. Yeah, it was
Okay.
up in Eastchester, in Westchester County.
Yeah.
Originally, when the job came over, we were exchanging tour. So Tommy and the other guys were pretty much changed and going out the door, and I was still I had come back from a fly, I think. So I was still in uniform, and Dave Smith from Truck 4, another squad. He was there, and so I said, Dave, I'll go with you. And we ran downstairs, and at that time we had in the merge we had other REPs from the other departments. We had a transit REP, which was pretty fast and faster than our REPs that we had. I think it was gas. And well, anyway, we shot up because Dave grew up in Eastchester, so he pretty much knew the area. So we were coming towards Marbledale Avenue in Eastchester, and I didn't know the area that well. I remember, young being down in Eastchester. I played football against Eastchester, so I kind of remember being in certain areas of Eastchester, so I had an idea where it might have been. And we're going down the road, and Dave says, "No, it's not here. The street where the house was," and he was right. It was set up on a hill, but he kind of like trying to figure it out. And I said, Dave, I don't know where it's at, but there's a bunch of guys behind cars down the road here, and that was Marbledale Avenue. So we made our way down there, and the perp, apparently Michael Frey was still in the car, and he was. It wasn't apparent. He was still in the car, and he had been shot. And a guy named Rich Morrissey was the officer from Eastchester that was shot in the head, laying by the side of the car. But you can ask those guys, Jim Carmody and Keith Broderick, I think, were up on top when they got there with the peacekeepers, so they would know. So anyway, we got our REP in position. Now, we didn't have heavy weapons, and so we had to make our way up. Well, first, we hunkered down with the Tuckahoe cops, because Tuckahoe and Eastchester right on the border. There was a Tuckahoe sergeant, and he had said shots coming from the window up there on that house. So and sure enough, some shots came out again. And so I said, Dave, Dave was the driver, so we had a bunker and very little gear in that REP. So I said to Dave, I said, I heard that the truck is here, and Officer Mike Lutz was the chauffeur that day for Truck 4, and the truck was up on the hillside. So I ran up there. I said to Mike, I said, "What do you got?" And he said, "What do you guys need?" And I said, "Well, Dave wants an MP5, which is fine, but I said I'll take a mini because where we're at, we were down below where the house was set up on a hill, and so I grabbed a mini and went. And as I was going there was a neighbor. He grabbed me, and there's actually a picture in I think my wife has it in an album somewhere. Me standing there with the mini and the helmet, my chin strap dangling like John Wayne. I felt so guilty of that because to me it didn't look good. So I'm standing with a mini, and the neighbor was telling me how to get to the back of the house the best way. So when I got back down to Dave, I gave him the MP5, and we kind of hunkered down there until Brian Wall came. He was the sergeant. Well, actually, no, we didn't hunker down yet. We got there, and the Tucko sergeant told me, where he was firing from. So I said to Dave, I said, "Dave, cover me. I'm going to go up on the. If you're facing the house, up on the hill, there was a warehouse on the right. I said, I'm going to go alongside the warehouse and try to make my way along the back of the house next door that had an 8-foot fence. So I managed to get up there and get an eyeball on the back of the house, but it wasn't a good position to be in. So I made my way back down. Yeah, I think he threw a few more shots down. And at that point, I was just trying to get to a good safe spot again. Got hunkered down with Dave again, and I said, "Dave, cover me again. I'm going to make my way up to the left side of the house, and that's where the neighbor had told me we would originally go. So, but I didn't think it was safe enough because it was more open. It wasn't open territory because there was tree line. There was some trees scattered about, but I used the trees to get my way up there, and got to the back of the house, and I could see the window, the open window, and I caught a glimpse of him moving around that room, so I knew he was still there, but I couldn't get a shot at him, and obviously he didn't take a shot at me, so I didn't return fire or anything. So I hunkered there for a bit until Brian Wall got there, and Brian Wall showed up with a couple guys from Truck 3, and now this is right after the merge, and one of the guys was Rodell Glover.
Trying to get him on the show.
Yeah, great guy, Rodell, and that was the first time I met Rodell. And so anyway, I ran back down the hill and said to Brian, Sergeant Wall, I said, I know how to get back up there. I told him I was going to go back up there. I said, because there's nobody covering the back of the house. Everybody's on the front end. And the peacekeeper was coming in with Jim Carmy and those guys. Anyway, he said, take somebody with you. And I looked around, and if you knew Rodell, he was in great shape, and so we made our way up. Little by little, we were making our way up. But at that time, Rodell had a plate for face protection. I think it was anyway. I think it might have been level 3. I'm not sure. Level 3 face protection, and I think I'm trying to remember because he didn't have a radio with him because it was short on radios, and I had a radio and I was trying to talk to him to tell him to move his way back up to me as I got into a better position, and I'll cover him so he could come up to me, and we couldn't talk to each other too easy, and I think the faceplate was hard to talk through, so I didn't understand what he was saying. Finally, we were able to get close enough to talk, and I said, I'm going to get to the deck, under the deck of the house, and that's where we went. And actually, I'm sorry, prior to that, being up at the back of the house was when they went to move Michael Frey. Get Rich Morrissey from behind the car. I knew Rich Morrissey through his family. That's how I remember it was him. I was there. And so when they made their move, I had said to Captain Wargo, he was saying, is there anybody behind the house? And that's when I answered up on the radio to Captain Wargo. I said, I'm behind the house. And I can remember saying to Lieutenant Green that I'm at 6 o'clock on the house. And they're because they're on the other side, and they're thinking 6 o'clock would be the front of the house if you're looking at it as a clock. right? So it was getting a little confusing at first. I had to say, okay, I'm at 12 o'clock. And that's when they said they were going to move up and get Morrissey out, I think. Or maybe it was when Frey was being moved out. One of them was going to be moved out. And they lit up the house. And I was below ground level because the basement. And I remember just crunching down and hearing the shots. I was like, okay, all right, it's going to be friendly fire now. Maybe let's do this house. But it was a pretty wild night. But then I was able to go back down and get Rodell and come up. And that's most of that night, me and Rodell, and then eventually Westchester County PD had some guys, and we covered that house from. We covered the back of that house from that position most of the night.
Definitely a tragic job, but one of the things that it does highlight, as I was reading a little bit further information on Officer Frey, is that ESU can really go anywhere within the immediate area if it calls for it. Like I the first time I remember hearing about that is Bob Masucci was on a number of years ago from One Truck, another very solid guy. And he
Yeah,
talked
yeah,
about that.
Bob.
And I've heard stories like that. Scott Zink's another one. He told me about, when they went mutual aid to New Jersey after a particularly bad hurricane in 1999. Bob Masucci had a building collapse in Jersey where Truck One went. He was one of the guys that was leading the rescues in Jersey. And then here you are down in Eastchester. It's outside your jurisdiction. But listen, I can say this comfortably. The old saying is when the people need help, they call the police. When the police need help, they call the emergency service unit. When they mean police, they don't just mean New York City police. It could be police anywhere. When the police need help and ESU can help, ESU will be there. Doesn't matter if it's NYPD, Port Authority Police, in this case, Eastchester, ESU will be there. And that's one of the many things I love about the unit. I always like asking this to guys that gained some time and eventually got to a sweet spot in their career, at least within the unit, to where you were, again, tried and tested by this point quite a bit with your background, just what you did on patrol, even before you got to emergency, and obviously everything else before that. But being an E-man is different because you're basically a jack of so many different trades. What was the point in your career in emergency where obviously you never feel like you know everything? If you feel like that, you got to get yourself a reality check. But what was the point where you felt finally, okay, I'm comfortable here. I feel like I belong here.
I had a great bunch of guys in Truck 4, and all the squads that were there. And whenever you, if you had an issue with something, someone was quick to help you, no matter what, right? And if, I guess about the 5-year mark is normally like when you really feel like you've earned enough time to open your mouth up and say what you need to say, and if if you felt you had the right answer, but I'd say, most guys, if you had the right answer and you felt you had the right answer and you raised your hand and say, hey, listen, they listened, but the first year it's best to keep your mouth shut and your eyes and ears open and absorb what the senior guys around the table are talking about, or on a job. Whatever they need, you get it done for them. That's a good practice.
Oh yeah. I mean, to be a fly on the wall in the REP, really any era, but especially that era, especially as the city was making a turnaround during that late 90s period heading into the new millennium. I like asking this to any cop who was in ESU in either 3 and 4 truck or 9 and 10 truck, the details, if there was one, to Yankee Stadium, especially during that period. There's a lot of big playoff games going on. The Yankees are in the middle of a dynasty, 4 championships in 5 years. Any stories from any Yankee playoff games during that era, or not really? Were you not detailed there as much?
I was before 9/11. I was on the 660 team. It's a short range, the rifle, not the long range team. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, my partner was Vinny Dans, and he was a Met fan. I was a Yankee fan, so we had a lot of chatter back and forth, especially on Subway Series. Vinny was a great guy, and there's a picture of Vinny up on top of Shea Stadium. With his radio up on his side. I took that picture, and somewhere along the way, the picture he took of me is lost. But I always remember that picture every time I see it. It reminds me of the days we'd be up on both stadiums.
It was fun during that period too because both teams were very good. There was a
Yeah,
legitimate
oh
debate
yeah,
back then between
yeah, oh yeah,
1997 and 2000, especially in
yeah,
1999 2000, of who was the better team, which
yeah,
was ultimately settled in 2000, where the right team won
yeah,
in that
yeah.
particular matchup for the World Series. And a couple of comments in the chat. John Scrivani says hi. He says looking good, Rich. Great stories from the legend. Glad
John,
he's
he's a
doing
great,
well.
great guy. Yeah.
Yep, John was on a little
Thank
while
thank
ago.
you, John.
Yep, love talking with him.
I,
And Steph.
prior to 9/11, I fractured my skull, and
Ooh,
you know, it was on an elevator job. Tommy Flannery was my partner, so it knocked the sense out of me for a while, and I thought it was going to put me off the job. Going through the MRIs and whatnot, and they were leaning towards getting me off the job. But 9/11 happened, all hands on deck, and I got to work with great guys like John Scrivani when he came back as a sergeant, and yeah, so that was just a reminder to me.
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes being hit in the head reminds you too. Sometimes.
I think we've all had moments like that. And Steph says, takes 2 years to learn how to fly the space shuttle and 5 years to learn to be a good E-man. I think that's
Yeah,
apropos. And he would know. Steph would certainly know. The day itself is, of course, a story in and of itself. But I think what was interesting is just the day before, September 10th, 2001,
yeah,
being with these guys,
yeah,
not knowing that for those guys to be, right before their last day, their last normal day. And again, we know as often is the case with jobs or with these jobs, I should say, FD and PD. We know how these gentlemen died, but one of the things that this program likes to focus on is how they lived. You had the chance to work with a lot of these guys, all 14 of them, up close
yeah,
and personal. I'm sure some of the Port Authority Police ESU guys as well, but just
yeah,
from
yeah.
14 from the NYPD side. Tell me about your favorite memories of each of the guys that you had the chance to work with, especially guys in Ford Truck like Steve and John.
Yeah, God, man, I tell you, awesome guys. But also, guys from FDNY from the FEMA team when I was on the FEMA team before
Oh,
9/11.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, so I knew, and Chris Blackwell was from Rescue 3. So many guys, but back to our guys, 14 guys, man. I said the day before I was in Def Tech training, distraction device training. We had to get recertified on it, and Rodney was there. Rodney was my boss as a sergeant. I knew him when he was a cop, but he was my boss as a sergeant in Truck 4 for about a year, before he went down to 8. And awesome guy. And Rodney was excited because Third Watch was playing that night, and he had his first speaking spot.
That's right. He was an actor too.
And he was all excited about that. And there was, it's. I happened to do a day tour that day, and do that class where a lot of the guys in that class were on a day tour in that class. We were going to be doing day tours the next day, and I didn't know that. Well, but so I knew a lot of guys in that class that day. But when I came back from that class, I got back to Truck 4, and I had to go down for an event down in Lower Manhattan with Patty McGee from One Truck.
Yep.
And I had to meet up with Tommy Sullivan, Sergeant Sullivan from 6, and a guy named, oh boy, what's his name? He was from Bronx Homicide. It'll come to me. It might be the fractured skull thing. But anyway, so I when I got back to 4, John Coughlin, who was a great, great guy, awesome guy, former Marine. He had given, when I broke my hand a year or two before, John gave me the book. Well, he kept on me. You got to read the book, Flags of Our Father. He knew how much I cared about the flag. He knew how much I was dedicated to our country and getting, being a Marine. And so he was on me. And we were working opposite squads. He was sergeant for Squad 3, and I was in second squad. So when I got back, well, when I broke my hand, he shoved the book in my hand when I came into health services down the hall in the 5-0 from Truck 4. And he says, now you got time to read it. Read it. And I did. It was an awesome book, right? What those Marines went through on Iwo Jima. And, well, anyway, I sat with John for a bit, and he says, hey, you want to do a day tour tomorrow? Because I switched squads, and I loved working with those guys, I wanted to, and the reason why I wasn't was I was doing a dive. I couldn't make the change, so I was doing a dive refresher course, and I had to be at 1,400 hours out at Floyd Bennett Field. I would have loved to have gotten out of it, Okay, because from where I lived up in Brewster, New York, it was a tough ride to get out to Floyd Bennett Field. But the reason why I had something to do that night, and I knew that that if I went for the dive refresher, and by the time I got out, I would be able to make what I had to do. And so John was on me. He says, I can make it. I can make it work. And I said, John, I better not. I better not. I kind of blew it off another time, and I'll stay with it. And that was the last time I saw John. And that night, going back to Steve. Steve had a boat, and I lived up in the Brewster area, and he lived over in Lake Carmel, and he had a boat, and he loved his boat, and he had it on Candlewood Lake, and he'd called me up about 2 weeks before 9/11, maybe it was a week or so. Franco Baraducci would know because he bought the boat, right? So anyway, Steve called me up and says, come on on the boat, and I swear to God, I wish I had been on that boat that day with him. But, he was just an awesome guy. We had a lot of fun times together. But anyway, so a lot of the guys that day that I had seen, and one of them was a young, new guy in ESU. And when I came back from the event I had to go to with Tommy Sullivan, we parked our cars at One Truck. We went over to Pug Uglies for a little while, came back to One Truck, and Brian McDonald was out sweeping the ramp. And we started talking to him. And what an awesome, awesome young man, and that was the first time I got to really know him and understand him. And he was so dedicated and so happy to be in ESU. And the other thing was that, he was an 82nd Airborne, and was so proud of.
He was a military guy too.
Yeah. And I knew a lot of guys that were in the military and 82nd Airborne. We talked about it a lot. And it was, unfortunately the last time I saw Brian too. And Paul Tolte, I'd met him a couple times, and he was John English's cousin. So, and John English, another awesome guy. I was proud to be on John's team, apprehension team, to be picked for his team right after 9/11. It's, the first 14 days I was on John Lampkin's team,
yep.
Doing recovery, looking for actually rescue, well, we weren't really rescuing anybody, but, we would go into the breaches down below. And the first day we were sent down below, John, one white was a sergeant on the team too. And Richie Hardigan, Kevin Donahue, and Franco Baraducci, they were on that team as well. I don't know if you want me to go into that, but because I'd like to finish up with the guys.
Whatever you want to do, it's fine by me.
Yeah, it's a solemn time every year, when you think about those guys, because they were just some awesome, awesome guys.
Oh, of course.
And Mike Curtin, after the shooting in Brooklyn, I was at the UN General Assembly that right after the Brooklyn shooting in 2000, and Mike grabbed me and he goes, "Hey, listen, I know you were thinking about switching trucks and going down and working Jimmy Spratt's squad in second squad, but he goes, you got to work with me. You got to come." And he goes, "I want you to partner up with Vick." I said, "Oh, Mike, man." Well, actually, he almost had me convinced, but I had an issue at home. It wasn't going to work out that well for me to go to the third squad for the days off, So, so I called Mike and I said, "Mike, I said, I'd really love to, and work with Vick any day." Right? And I said, "But the thing is, Mike, you want to pull back the leash on Joe, you'll have to pull back the leash on both of us. Because when you set us both loose in two truck area, we're going to have a blast together." And I wish I had that chance.
Yeah.
Wish I had that chance.
When you mentioned Steve Driscoll earlier, a lot of people don't know this, but Steve Driscoll was actually a street crime guy before he went to ESU. He was in street crime for a bit. A lot of people don't know that street crime, which since is defunct, it went out in 2002 when Commissioner Kelly disbanded it, was part of SOD. So you could stay within the Special Operations Division going from street crime, which was a citywide unit,
Yeah.
to emergency service, which was something that Steve did. He joined ESU
A
in
lot of awesome
1996.
guys. A lot of awesome guys came out of street crime. Steve was definitely so awesome.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot of great stories about him.
Yeah.
There's a John Coughlin story that Franco told me, and I've heard a lot between yourself and a lot of other guys who work with him, Steve Lanos and many other guys too. But Franco tells a great story, and I'm paraphrasing. You can go back for all of you, those of you in the audience, and check out the story from my interview with him last year, where John Coughlin kept asking Franco for jars of his mother's sauce. And Franco just kept forgetting because, people get busy, life's happening, you get a lot of stuff going on day to day. Franco would always forget, which annoyed
Yeah.
Sergeant Coughlin to no end. So one day, there's an EDP job where Franco, I believe, is the lead bunker, and the guy had a big knife, but he had thrown something on the floor. I think he threw water on the floor, whatever. Comes in, and Franco, as he's going in to get the guy, slips on whatever the liquid was and goes down. So the EDP actually, I think he has two knives, as I remember Franco telling me. He's coming down, stab, and he's thankfully stabbing the bunker and not Franco. John Coughlin, who was, for those of you that don't know, John Coughlin was a big, strong man.
Oh, yeah, he was.
John, using his tools and also his natural strength, was able to corral the guy without incident. Nobody was hurt, thank God, not even the perp. So the next day, to express his gratitude, Franco brings in the sauce finally. And Sergeant Coughlin just looks up and goes, "Gee, Franco, is this what it took for me to finally get some jars of sauce?" So I've always remembered that story. It's actually a very, very cute story that Franco told me, amongst many great ones about all those guys. And when you mentioned Two Truck, Vigiano, of course, shot 3 times in the line of duty, one of the more decorated guys the department's had. There's John DeLara as well. And John DeLara, who, again, another guy that there was plenty of great stories about. If you look at the operations of the RMI, you kind of have to trace it back to both Sergeant Hargrove and John DeLara, because originally it was Al Baker's invention. But in the early 90s, DeLara decided the manual had to be rewritten. So him and Sergeant Hargrove sat down and rewrote it. And I think a lot of what they included in that manual, I'm sure it's been altered since in accordance with the times, but a lot of what they originally wrote in the 90s is still in operation today. And for those of you that are familiar with the NYPD Cops episodes from 1994, when they're doing the Bad Boys introduction, you can see John, the back of him. It's not the front, but he's wearing the E2 RMI vest. He's actually driving it in the opening. So that was his baby. That was his, one of his proudest things. So
drank a few Mississippi Muds with John up at Camp Smith.
A lot
uh,
of funny stories I've heard about. I would have loved to have had him on the show. I know I would have had a lot of laughs. Yeah, for sure on that one. Before I continue with 9/11, you did mention that shooting in August of 2000. It's another job that people kind of, not those who were there, but because of what happened the next year, it gets lost in the shuffle a bit sometimes. But this was August 12th, 2000, if I'm not mistaken. There was a guy in his mid-40s. His parent, he had a history of emotional problems. This was just a day where, as I told both Joes, Guerra and Dolan, nobody won here. Everybody lost in the end. It was just a tough day. But he was having emotional problems in his mid-40s. His parents had trouble controlling him, called the police. I believe he had a shotgun on him. A shootout, I should say, ensued, where multiple officers were hit. And finally, the perp was shot and killed, which is something that ESU prides itself on not doing. It's always a last resort. But just being there that day, and if you don't want to tell the whole story, that's fine. But just anecdotes from that day and your perspective.
Well, very quickly, I'll say this. I'll try to get this quickly. Several times I've been asked to write a book, and Peg Tier, who was the reporter who did a 3-page article on my shooting a year after the shooting, first shooting, Newsday reporter, did a phenomenal 3-page article. She didn't get everything right. When people write about you, they normally don't, right? Unless you write it yourself, right? After 9/11, Robin Moore had taken me out to dinner, and he's a great author who wrote Green Berets, French Connection, Happy Hooker, and whatnot, and became movies. And he'd offered me to write a book about my career at the time, and I turned him down, but and a lot of people were like, "You turned down." He wrote the Green Berets, which became a movie. The French Connection became a movie, and whatnot. But we became very good friends, and my wife and I actually we went to his funeral in 2009, I believe it was, and his wife Helen, who was very good friends with both Trish and I. You know, let me say this. So there were other books that were written that I didn't participate in, right? And my name was mentioned, and they may not have gotten it right, what was going on, right? But when Bravehearts was being written, Cynthia Brown, I wasn't supposed to be in the book. Ray Kelly had assigned me to help her with the book and pick the guys, men and women, for that book. Awesome men and women, right, that I had worked with in my career at some point, right? And then when I came back from Haiti, Ray Kelly and Cynthia wanted me in the book, and they told Teresa to convince me to be one of the chapters in the book. And that's why I'm in that book. But I shared some things about my life with Cynthia, but when it came to the shooting on August 12th of 2000, most of that she got from the 49 that was written, the last 49 written. Chief Fox said,
Great man.
Chief Fox wanted to put me in for the Medal of Honor. I had gotten the Combat Cross for that shooting, and I know how that job ended. Okay, and I know, and I've been told by guys like Seth Garr and Bobby Zajac, who were the bunker team inside the house, were able to see the end of that shooting. And Patty McGee and Greg Welch were in the backyard with me. I ran past them when I jumped off the porch, the deck from above. You want me to go into it a little bit?
Yeah, as much as you want to. It's fine by me.
So I originally went out there with Joe Ocasio, and I had my 660 rifle. I was put on the roof with John Lampkin. Joe Montezo reached out and asked if I would come down and ground my rifle and be a bunker to make entry on the house. And he said, "Who are you with?" And I said, "I'm here with Ocasio." He goes, "No." He goes, "I'm going to put you with somebody else." And so I said, all right. I said, "I'll go get a bunker, but I don't have a Glock with a light." So I went to 7 Truck, and the chauffeur that day, Danny Mullane, a phenomenal guy I went through STS with. I asked Danny for a Glock with a light. And when I got back to Montezo, he said, "Your job is to get as deep into the house as you can to get to the basement door and cover it. That's where we think he is." Now, he had Mini 14. He had bought a brand new Mini 14. And when we made entry in that house, that Mini 14 was still in the house. So we knew if he wasn't in there, he didn't have that many anymore. But he had a handful of guns and knives and swords down in the basement when we finally made entry down there. But he wasn't in the house anymore when we made entry. So after we cleared the house, after I went down to the basement, and I went out the back to the backyard, and I was hanging out there, and Joe and I met up together again because I came down with him, and he had a Mini 14, and I think he was put at the back of the stack on that entry, I think. But anyway, so I'm standing in the backyard with Joe Kelleher, who was the acting commissioner, right?
Right. Yeah. Safer just retired.
Yeah. Right. Or he was looking for another job, I think. I think he was still the commissioner, but Kelleher was filling in as the acting commissioner. Joe Dunn, who was chief of department at the time.
Yep.
And Jack Scanlon, who was chief of patrol, and he was my CO for my first shooting with 4-4. And he introduced me to Kelleher, and we were talking, right, as one of his guys, and Chief Joe Dunn. And then we heard the shots. They went out to the street side. I said, "Joe, come with me." And we went to the backyard where the fence was. And I still heard the shots. And then I heard somebody yelling. Oh, no, I heard the shots, right? The next volley, I think it was. And I climbed over the fence, and I ran through, and there were tomato plants. And there were 2 dogs, and it happened to be the Perps dogs. One was a pit bull, and one was a golden retriever. They both jumped on me. They ran up on me, and I shot one through one first and pushed the other one away. with the bunker. I went like this, wham, and just shot one of the dogs, and they both ran away. Unfortunately, I shot the golden retriever through the stomach. It survived. I found out later on.
Okay, good.
And I felt bad because I think the pit bull was the aggressor one. That golden retriever was probably trying to lick me. I don't know.
You almost broke my heart there, but thankfully you survived.
Right. I love golden retrievers. Great dogs. Yeah, all dogs. I love all dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I got up on the back deck, and it turned out to be the house next door that he had shot Joe Guerra in. And I wasn't with that team. And there's a story because later on at the hospital, Joe Dolan tried to hand me a Mini 14 and says, "Here, you dropped this." And I said, "I didn't have a Mini. I don't know who had the Mini. I know, Joe had a Mini, but I know he didn't drop it." Well, anyway, so I was up. If I'm saying too much, let me know if I'm talking too much.
Sure.
I don't know how much time you have left. But well, anyway, I got up on the deck. I was by myself at first, and I heard somebody yelling, "He's going your way! He's going your way! He's going your way!" So I'm looking. I cantered the bunker to my left, and I'm looking out, and I had a Smith on as my sidearm, right? 9mm Smith. But I'm looking out because I wanted the Glock light because it was just starting to get dark before we went into the house, and I knew it was going to be dark. So that's why I asked Danny for a Glock with a light on it. And so I'm looking, and all of a sudden, boom! The first blast from the shotgun came from my left, and I could see through the port the flash, the muzzle flash. Boom! When it went off. I went, there you are. And so I started to engage him, and I got a few shots off with the Glock. And I think it's stovepiped on me. They don't really know. I don't remember if they ever figured it out, but it was a stovepipe though. And it jammed. At that point, Joe came up alongside my right, and Billy Fisher wasn't there yet, but Joe came up alongside my right, put the Mini up. Well, I yelled it. I said, I'm out. And that's when I went back to Chris Birkenbrand with the tactics instructors. I told him later on that I don't like that idea anymore because every time I said it was out, the guy would fire the shot at me. Anyway, I took the Glock that jammed, right, and when I realized it was a stovepipe, I threw it down, and then I started engaging with the other Smith, my Smith, and after I completed, we were lobbying back and forth, right, and so with my Smith now, I kept trying to engage him, and then I yelled, "I'm out!" and I dumped the magazine. I thought I was out when it stovepiped on the Glock the first time. That's why I said I'm out the first time, and he fired up at us, and I took the Glock to think I had to do it, magazine change, but I didn't. That was the old style too, was to put the handgun in while you're holding the bunker, put it in here, hold it with your thumb, and after you dump the mag, and slam a new one in. Right. Well, anyway, I went back to engage on the first lobby with the Smith, and I saw him and I said, "Hit him, Joe! Hit him, Joe!" Because I yelled first. I yelled, "I'm out!" and I dumped the mag, and I go to change over again, and I'm looking through the port, and I'm yelling, "Hit him, Joe! Hit him, Joe!" And Joe lined the Mini up and fired down at him. Okay, didn't hit him. Okay, but at that I don't even know if Joe got that round off at that point. I know that Mini kept going off on both sides of my head because eventually Billy Fisher had Minis. They were both going off like this. When that shot came up, when Joe leaned up on my bunker, when that shot came off, my bunker went flying, okay, and Joe went. His hands went up like that, and that's when he got hit in the thumb. I think was that first time he got hit. Okay, he stayed in the battle. Joe stayed in the battle after he got hit first time, right? And so I continued to engage without the bunker, and they continued to shoot. By that time, Billy Fisher was up on us. We were trying to engage him, and anyway, Billy tried to push me against the wall, and I said, the second time I said I was out, I dumped the magazine. I yelled, "I'm out!" Right, and he threw another shot up at us. Okay, Billy tried to push me against the wall, yelling, "Get cover, get cover, get cover!" But I lined up on him because by that time he was starting to feed the shotgun one at a time. He didn't have time to load up and fill the shotgun up, right? So he was doing one at a time. So he's crouched down in the stairwell, 3-foot retainer wall stairwell, and it was perfect point for as a Marine. Fields of fire. He sat in a 3-foot high stairway, outside basement door. Okay, and he had the whole backyard, and to his right was a chain link fence and us on the deck. We had a high point on him, but that was his weakest point. But his left side, his weak side was if you're a right-handed shooter, his weak side was a 8-foot fence. So he had plenty of cover that way. He had top cover, right, and but he had us to engage now, right. So when he was trying to load, he was kind of crouched in, and I was like, wait, and I lined my gun up, and boom, I got one shot off. It hit him in the back. That's the round that went through his back, and he rolled. He went, oh, and he got in tight. So I go, I got him. So by that engage, I think he got one more shot off, and then by that time, I think Joe had gotten hit in the leg, and Billy had helped him back, had gotten him back, and I was up on the deck by myself at that point. So I realized I'm in my last magazine. I got to do something. So I yelled, we need a. This was when, I'm sorry, before I was in my second magazine. I yelled, we need a distraction device. We need a distraction device. Yelling and screaming, and apparently, Greg Welch heard me, right, and threw a distraction device at him, and I was hoping it would get into the well with him. When it would go off, it would scare him to stand up, right? Well, it didn't. It hit a bike, and I'm looking down at the bike. When it hit the bike and bounced back, and it went off, it blinded me at first, because boom, it went off, and I like kind of frazzled a bit because of the bright flash, right? And the perp was sitting up against the door laughing, and I said, "This son of a bitch is crazy." I'm sorry.
That's
This
fine.
son of a gun is crazy, and of course he was, but he realized, okay, he's sitting up now, he sees me, because he must have thought I got blown up or something. I don't know. So I started shooting down at him with my second mag. But when I yelled, I'm out on the third one, and that's when those guys that at that point around that time is when Joe got shot in the leg, I think, because I swear every time I yelled out, I'm out, reload, he would fire a shot. So I'm pretty sure that's when Joe got shot in the leg. But Joe would be able to tell you. I think he might have told you that. I don't know. But if you spoke to Joe, have you ever spoken to Joe?
Dolan or Guerra? Agasio? No, Agasio I've had on too. Yeah, he's been on the show.
Oh, all right.
Yep.
I heard it. I don't think I heard it. He'd been on. So anyway, I realized I'm in my last magazine. I jumped down on it. I took maybe 1 or 2 steps off that porch, that deck, to the backyard. I think I would have made not 1 step, because when I jumped, I think I just caught 1 step, and then got my traction going. I ran past Patty McGee and Greg Welch were running. Patty was running towards me, and I yelled, "You can't get this son from here." So I went up to the fence, went up over the chain link fence, and John Coughlin was the one that said this first. He said it was like Audie Murphy. You flanked him. What happened was when I got into his yard, I went to the other side of the yard fast as I could. I played football in high school, and I played lacrosse, and I ran a 4.6. I think I did a 4.6 with that heavy vest and helmet on. So I got to the other side of that yard, and because I knew those guys were there now. Like Greg was there, and Patty were under the deck that I was on. So he was looking at them, and he might have been trying to reload as he was looking at them. I flanked him from that other side of that yard and went right at him. And when he turned and looked at me, it looked like deer in the headlights. I had him, and I got about 5 or 6 shots. I think there was 7 9mm rounds recovered, from the 49, and I was told this, by I think inspections or whoever the firearms team, whatever it was, the firearms investigation team. Well, anyway, I think I hit him straight on. I got like 5 or 6 in the chest, I think, and he just kind of crumpled over. I climbed down into that wheel well. I mean the retainer wall well, and I checked for a pulse, and that's when he was laying there flat over on his side, and I believe it was a mini round. I went through his cheek and came out. Boom! I was checking his pulse, and I was just getting up after checking his pulse, and it was so close. Boom! And then I jumped back and put my hand, thinking it was going to help me. My hand behind my neck, and that's when some rounds went off against the house because they must have thought, other guys must have thought Pert was still alive shooting, but I yelled out, "He's dead! He's dead! He's dead!" And that was the end of that job. And I'm standing up, and everybody came from everywhere. The cavalry came, everyone. And I said, I think, trying to remember, I think it was to Greg Welch, and I dropped the Glock because it jammed on me, and Dave Isaac held up the Glock, and he goes, "I got it." And I said, "Good, I got to give that back to Danny Mullane." But that's how. That's
Go ahead.
No, that's how that job, and it's and then we were rushed off to the hospital, and that's when I saw Joe Ocasio in there, and we couldn't see Joe Guerra because he was in surgery, and it was bad. It was a bad day, but bad day all around.
For sure, but thankfully, all of them are still with us. Joe Guerra, who suffered very serious injuries, as detailed on this show. It's a miracle, quite frankly, that Joe Guerra is still with us, and we're certainly glad that he is.
Yeah, I just saw him a couple of weeks ago, and he, what a guy. He's a good guy, real good guy.
Yeah, solid.
What a great heart too, man. What a great heart. To go through what he went through.
Guy too.
Yeah, Housing Rescue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was in truck. I was with that day before we got called out there. Joe Ocasio and I were in the same REP as a fly guys over in truck 3 that day, and I worked with Joe that day too, Guerra, and we had a barricade just before that, and a captain actually put herself in the middle and went inside the apartment. We had a captain barricaded in the apartment with the perp, and that was another story. But it was quickly resolved. But on our way back is when that went off, that job, and the desk, I got a hold of the desk, and they wanted me to go out with my 660 rifle. That's how I originally got involved for that job from the Bronx.
Like I said, I didn't want to skip over it. We were talking about 9/11, but I'm like, you know what? As we said off the air, I did want to touch on that job with you as well, because as those of you know, of the E-Men interviews we've done previously, Vinny Manco talked about it. Both Joes, well, 3 Joes, Ocasio, Dolan, and Guerra talked about it. I knew you were there, so I didn't want to skip over your perspective either. But getting back to September 11th, before we move on to a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about for the rapid fire, let you take it from here. When exactly did you get down to the Trade Center that day? I know you had to go in later in the day originally before.
Yeah, so when I got home rather late that night, and I was going to try to sleep in because I had to get up. I could sleep in because I was doing a 1400 start out at Floyd Bennett Field, and my ex-wife at the time, she yelled, "Turn on the TV!" Now it was my youngest daughter was going off to nursery school, and she was getting her ready, and she turned on the TV. I turned on the TV, and I saw the first plane crash. And I thought it was an accident at first, but I knew, the extent of that was going to be an all hands, and they'll probably need more people. And so I was getting dressed, and then I saw the second plane hit, and I knew, it was bad, right? We were being attacked, and I went downstairs and I kissed them goodbye. I kissed my little daughter goodbye before, and my wife gave me her lunch for me to bring with me. And it wasn't until a few days later I saw the lunch sitting on the passenger seat in my car, not realizing I never ate it. But I shot into the Bronx. I got to truck 4, and it was on TV. And I believe when we were getting ready, I was waiting for Tommy. My partner was Tommy Flannery before 9/11. He was my last partner in truck 4. Anyway, I got dressed very quickly, and I think we watched the second Tower 2 come down first, but it was the second tower that was hit, and it had come down. And I went downstairs to go down to the trade center with John McCullough from Truck 4. He worked midnights, and he was loading up the pickup truck, Truck 4's pickup truck, with supplies, and him and I jumped in the truck, and he drove. We went down the West Side Highway, and when we got down past Chelsea is when the North Tower came down. But we kept driving right into it. It was like the sea parted, and people were running. They were just moving out of the way as John drove in, and we made our way into the marina there, North Cove Marina, I think it's called. And we made our way on the sidewalk there, and that's when we saw Tony Johnson with the light, with one of our trucks by himself. He was trying to wave guys where to park and all that. And I ran up to the front of the line, and we were stacked up because we were stacking up in that area on the sidewalk side, east side of the marina. And I ran up to the car, and in the car was, at that time, Captain Yee, and his driver was Mike Hansen, and they were in shock. They were there when it all came down, and they were just kind of like sitting there, and so I said, we got vehicles stacking up, and they're still coming, so we had to do something. So I ran down to the other side of the marina, to the riverside, on the west side of the marina there, southwest side, and there was all these benches there, and I looked. It was almost like a clearing, we could put more vehicles in there. So I ran back to Captain Yee and said, "Listen, the marina, we can move all the vehicles, start stacking them in there," and so Mike got the idea too. And I ran down in front of them until we got to that point, and Yee said that the benches, and he thought they were bolted down to the ground, and I ran over and just started sliding them across the brick facade sidewalk, kept sliding them, and then I ran. Their car was there, their vehicle was there, and I ran down towards Tony and said, "Tony, come on," and then we started stacking vehicles, and I thought that was going to be our first temporary headquarters, but then they moved us to Stuyvesant High School. So most of the day we were in and out from Stuyvesant. Tommy and I was with other guys before Tommy. I met up with Tommy, we're back and forth into Building 6 and back out, and then at some point I married up with my partner Tommy, and so we were together into the evening. We would go out to some areas to move some vehicles and stuff. So other vehicles, bigger vehicles, could get in, and then we went back to Stuyvesant High School for the rest of the night. We thought, until we were told to go back to Truck 4. You're going to get more equipment, get some rest. But we didn't want to rest. Neither one of us wanted to rest. None of us. And that's when Sergeant John Scrivani, that night, we laid our heads down for the night in the gym. A few of us, but I had to come back early to be with that was already picked to go on to Lampkin's team, and to start early searches down below where Sergeant Port Authority Sergeant, how can I forget his name?
McCullough.
Yeah, where he was recovered.
Yeah.
Sergeant from Port Authority recovered alive. Well, they had survivors there. The two Port Authority officers that were there, they sent us in below to go search below. If they figured, I guess, if there were survivors there, there must be survivors down below. So we went down below, and Richie Hardigan and I were tag team partners there. We were carabined together, and we would get in, try to dig, and move around, and we were down in the sub-level. I think sub-level 4, where Port Authority garages were, the Port Authority PD cars. I remember opening up one of their vehicles, and what scared me was the key was still in the ignition, and when I opened it up, the car started, when you open up a car door and it bing, bing, and well, anyway, so So we did our searches down there, and they said we could have a break. And Richie and we didn't want to take a break, but Juan said, Sergeant Juan White said, no, we're on a break. We're being ordered to take a break. This was sometime late morning or early in the afternoon. I can't remember times then. So we said, we know where we came from. What if we just go out and try to go out this way, and we'll be on our break? So Juan said, okay. And we made our way out to it. We found an opening, and it was bright light, like the light of God, and we crawled out there, and we were actually in the crater of where both buildings had collapsed. We made our way up the hill there, and Richie and but prior to that, through the night until we were sent to 4, I kept looking at the flag up on the stage, in Stuyvesant High School, and just thinking, look what happened to our country, and insignificant. Well, let me back this up a bit. When we found out who was missing, I'm saying, these guys, they're still alive. They're still alive. Mike Curtin would hold the building up. John Coughlin would hold the building up. Vinny Dan's former Marine hold the building up. These guys, Vinny was a steel worker, of course, he knew, right? So when we got out of there, we came up the hillside there, the crater side, and I said to Richie, I said, look, the sphere, it made it. It's still there. The sphere, the center was, that was the center of ground zero, the sphere, right? It was sat between the two buildings. I remember that from a kid growing up, doing class trips there, right? So the firefighter goes, yeah, and that's the antenna off the North Tower. So I looked at Richie. I said, we're putting a flag up for Mike and the guys. I want Mike to see a flag, and I want those guys to see a flag, because most of them were military guys. Brian, not most of them, but a lot of military guys. Brian McDonald the night before, Mike Curtin was a sergeant, and significant to Mike. Mike, when he recovered the Marine's body out in Oklahoma, he wrapped that Marine in an American flag, right? And that was significant to why we were taking our guys out, right? And then the controversy was, why, but I knew how important the flag was to Mike and John, so I wanted to see a flag. So I went to Juan White and said, hey, we're gonna go get a flag. And he goes, well, where are you gonna get one? And I said, I don't know. And Richie and I went out onto Broadway. We were looking at, buildings had their flags up. They're 24/7 with lights on them. I didn't want to take a flag down that was already up. But I ran back to Juan with Richie, and I said, hey, we're going to go get a flag. We think we know we can get one. We're going to go where? I said, well, Stuyvesant High School stage. And I remember Juan saying, don't get in trouble. So he was my sergeant on the 18 for a while, too. Anyway, Richie and I ran back to Stuyvesant High School, and on our way back, Chief Patel, he goes, where are you guys going? So I went over to Chief Patel, and I said to him, I said, Chief, if he didn't stop us, we were going to go get a flag, and from Mike and the boys. And he looked at me, and he said, well, where are you going to get a flag? I said, Stuyvesant High School stage. And he goes, you go get that flag. And so I went to Stuyvesant High School, and it was busy because on the stage, that's where they had all the maps, and they had engineers, and they had big boss. I think Espo was there. I think I'm trying to remember all the big bosses that were there. Anyway, but McCardle was standing there, and John. I known John a long time. I knew him, back when he was in the 4-4, and well, anyway, John, Richie goes, well, we better not. I said, no, just follow me. So like a Marine, I kind of marched up the stairs, marched out down across the stage towards where the flag was on in its stanchion, and I grabbed the guide iron. And McCardle looked at me like, what the hell are you doing? So I lifted the flag up like I was supposed to do it and marched down and over to where Richie was. And we rolled up the flag because we didn't want to this wasn't a spectacle. We didn't want to do it for a spectacle. We wanted to get a flag up for those guys. And we wrapped it in a blanket. And as we were going out of Stuyvesant, Patel and his entourage were coming in. And he goes, unfurl that flag. And I said, all right. Because I knew the reporters were down in the corner there by Stuyvesant. So when we came out, I didn't want to keep it down low. I didn't want that, I didn't want. Anyway, I saw Sue Scott, and she had a pickup truck. And I said, Sue, can you give us a ride over to Church and Day? And she said, sure. So, because we had run all the way there. We didn't want to run all the way back. And we didn't have a lot of time. So we went back over there and into the checkpoint there. Now, they had checkpoints around. And it was a frozen area around. They tried to freeze it up. And there was no press allowed inside that frozen area. So when I got out of the back of the pickup truck with Richie, I said to myself, I said, I'm going to carry this flag with pride. So I unfurled it and put it over my shoulder, loosely over my shoulder. I kind of held the bottom of it, I think. And I walked in between building 4 and 5, right, towards the sphere. Bless you. And so I on the way in, and this is another thing. What I didn't know is somebody about a few years later handed me a CD called "What We Saw" with Dan Rather, and it says, and you can see the back of me going in, but you can't make out NYPD too much on my shirt because of my harness and everything. And they said, "Firemen bringing in the first flag of Ground Zero." Somewhere I have that CD, but still, I didn't care whether it was fire, PD. I didn't care who it was. The flag had to go up, right? So I walked up, and Richard tell you there was a battalion fire chief there at the checkpoint, and he saw me. He was looking at me, and I said, "Chief, if you don't mind, if you can give me 2 firemen, we're gonna put with a ladder. We're gonna put a flag up for our guys here because I knew firefighters that were military too, and former Marines, and so." I wanted everybody to see that flag, and I wanted everybody to lift their heads up because we're going to beat this. Well, that's how I felt, So we got to the next portion where you had to walk across a beam to where this pole was, and I was waiting there, and with Richie, and when these 2 firemen were bringing a ladder across that beam, and if you fell off that beam, you went 1 floor down this side. If you fell this side, you went 2 floors down. So it was precarious to go through, and you remember it was a really beautiful day outside the Ground Zero, but it was smoky and whatnot, and hot and sweaty. So I felt bad for these guys. And when they put the ladder up, I almost handed the flag to a fireman, to the fireman. But Richie goes, "Get up there!" And I went up there, and as I went to put the flag out, I'm saying to myself, "What am I going to do when I get up here?" But as I saw that the pipe up the cross section of it was hollow, I tried to push it into there, but it wouldn't fit. But as I did that, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know anybody was taking pictures. Okay, but from what I know is that TARU was the only ones assigned to help the FBI with pictures. So they were the only ones allowed to have cameras. And if you were caught with a camera, they would take it away, confiscate it. So at that point, Bill McNulty from TARU was taking pictures, and he quickly realized what was going on. And he told Andy Finn from TARU, "Hey, look," and he was the videographer, and he captured it on video. Okay. And at that time, the fire battalion chief yelled out, "Breezehead arms!" And it's an awesome video. It's finally released by the NYPD officially in 2017, but not a lot of people have seen it, I don't think. But it's an awesome, it just sends a chill through you when all those guys saluting. It was everybody. There were firefighters, there were police officers, there was sanitation, Port Authority, and NYPD, and volunteer firemen and construction workers, all of them saluting. I guess a lot of them were military because they had some pretty good salutes on them. Well, anyway, we got the flag up, and Bill McNulty told me a while back, not long after 9/11, but he said, I was going to get you guys to see if you guys would, get your names. And he goes, "I saw you guys going," and they would blow a whistle. Fire whistle, or they would blow a horn 3 times, meant everybody out of the sight. Something was coming down. So as we were he said, he goes, I ran because it went off 3 times. We had to get out of there, but you guys just kept on going into, to where we had to go and meet up with our other guys. And said, yeah, because we had a job to do. We knew Liberty, when Liberty wasn't coming down. We knew all that, and we felt that. We just wanted to get back to work. And that was pretty much I think that was the story you were looking for, right?
Yes, and Steve Stefanakis. I'm going to try to display it from my phone here, so I apologize if the quality isn't that good. I'm going to try to get it into the frame. This is the picture.
Now that picture, if you got a few minutes?
Yeah, go ahead.
That picture is not me in that picture. Okay, I'll tell you a story behind that. So, thank you, Steph.
Yes, thank you, Steph. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Steve. All right. So, a few weeks later, the next few days we start seeing flags up. Me and Richie would, wow, look at that! Wow, look at those flags. And I got up on the roof. We lowered the flag. It was all military guys. We go up on I forget what the name of the building is, but that big flag that draped down the side of the building. I was on part of that, but I stood back and just stood at attention when it was lowered. I think Jimmy McHenry had something to do with that, and another great guy, right? Well, anyway, a few weeks later, Richie and I think we're in the bottom of Building 6, sub basement. It's like 6th or 7th floor, down there, pretty far down, and we get a radio transmission. Miller, Hardigan, up top, and Richie and I are looking at each other like, oh, what did we do? And I think Richie was like, what did you do?
Not me.
I didn't do anything, Richie. I didn't do anything. So anyway, we get up top, and there were 2 Suburbans there from the commissioner's office. And then he's like, what did you do? And I'm like, look, what did you do? Because I know I didn't do anything. At least I don't think. Right? So anyway, we get in the one of the Suburbans. They bring us over to 1PP, and then they bring us in. And I didn't even, as many times I've been in 1PP with chiefs that I drove down there or for a meeting or whatever, I didn't know there was another elevator just for the commissioner. Right? But they brought us into that elevator and brought us up to the floor. And so anyway, and we're both looking at each other like one of us really messed up. They're doing a special just for us, right? So we get there and we get up to the floor and we come out. And who comes running up was, I was going to say Chief Dunn, but First Deputy Commissioner Joe Dunn, right? And he goes, Rich, come here, because he remembers me from the year before, from the shooting and all and whatnot. So he goes, come here, and he brings me over to this table. And on the table is this, and it's still in the commissioner's office, I believe, is that picture blown up in a frame. And I look at Richie and I go, Richie, look, somebody got a picture of our flag. That's cool. That's great, right? And Dunn walks off. So we're standing there, and we're all excited. Somebody got a picture of our flag. And a guy named John Body, I think Body, I'm trying to remember how you say his name, but he was a photographer for Carrick's book, Commissioner Carrick's book. Mm-hmm. He was assigned from Taru to work on that book. And I think some guys were a little displeased with him, but he went looking for the picture. So he didn't think anybody got a picture, but the commissioner knew that Richie Hardigan and Rich Miller put up a flag. Right? We put it up with a bunch of people, but the commission knew it was Richie Hardigan and Rich Miller. That's it right there.
This is from Pete Segretti.
Pete's right. Thanks, Pete. Thank you.
This is the whole picture for those that want to see it.
That's it. That's that day right there. That's September 12th, the next day. Okay. So we're looking at the picture, and he says, sign the picture. And I said, why? And he goes, Commissioner Carrick's going to put it in his book. And I looked at Richie. Richie, man, Commissioner Carrick's going to put our flag in his book. I thought that was cool, right? So he says to me, he goes, so sign the picture. And I said, me and Richie were like, we both looked at each other. We were like, no, wait a minute. We'll get the guys that are in the picture to sign it for you. And he goes, no, that's you guys. And we were like, I beg to differ with you, guy. That ain't us. I mean, there was a lot of people around, firefighters, sanitation guys. There were, Port Authority cops. That's not us. And he was adamant it was us. And I don't know what his motive was. All right. but it was going in Carrick's book. And I met with Carrick just before he went away at his house. To talk to him about where that flag was at, because it was missing. But that's another story, another day, I think. But so anyway, Dunn comes back over, and he goes, "What do you think? What do you think? The commissioner's going to put it in his book." I said, "Yeah, I heard that. I just heard it from this guy here." And he goes, "You guys going to sign that?" And we said, "Well, you know what? I don't know if it was Richie or I, but we said, I think we both said it, but we'll get the guys that are in the picture." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, that's not us." He goes, "What do you mean it's not you guys? Is that the flag?" I said, "Yeah, that's our flag." And he looked at Body, and he says, I won't go into those words, but I don't think he was too happy. And when I found out later on, that Commissioner Carrick wasn't too happy about that either. That wasn't the original photograph, but the book already went to print.
Was this the Lost Son? I think
It might have been.
Because that was the book he was working on at the time. I know.
Yeah, he signed the book to me. But I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Bertie Carrick, of course, former 40th Police Commissioner of the NYPD. Prior to that, he was Corrections Commissioner too.
So we weren't talking about it. Listen, putting up that flag didn't make us heroes. So and I didn't feel like it to be a spectacle about it either, a dog and pony show about it either, or anything like that. That flag went up for a reason for Mike and those guys, and that's why I wanted to put the flag up. And I didn't do it alone. There was a bunch of other people involved in getting that flag up. And so anyway, so about a year later, sometime along the way, I got to see the video of the flag raising, and it's awesome, I think. And just it sends a chill through you when that battalion chief yells out, "Present arms." But about a year later, Commissioner Kelly is now the commissioner, and word came down from the commissioner's office that DCPI wanted me to speak to the press. And I said, all right. So I did to a few reporters, and I said, if you go negative about the fire department, I'm going to shut the interview down. I'm not doing it. Because at that time they were calling them hooligans and whatnot, and they went through. They lost 343 guys, and I knew a lot of those guys. I knew not a lot of those. I knew some of those guys, and I said I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go there. So, I kind of brushed off the interviews because they were looking for a story. All right, I don't care if the flag I put up was first, second, third, fourth, or 1,000 later. I know why the flag went up. And so a reporter came to my house, invited, because she couldn't. I didn't want to do it over the phone anymore. But I said to her right away, I said, if you go negative, and she brought her daughter with her. I said, if you go negative on the fire department, I'm going to shut the interview down. And we had a nice, pleasant conversation. And so after dinner, my ex-wife at the time, she was making dinner, so she made dinner, and I said, stay for dinner. So we talked, and after dinner was over, she started asking me, well, you got to have some remorse or something like that, that FD got credit for putting up a flag. And I went, that's it. I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm done with the interview. And that's what I told her. I said, I'm going to tell you. And that's what I said to her. I said, I don't care what's first, second, third, fourth, 1,000 later. If they put a flag up, that's great. And if we put a flag up and that inspired their flag to go up later on in the day, if that was the case, I'm glad that we were able to lift our heads up and lift the heads up of everybody that was around there when the flag went up. And if that flag lifted the heads up for other people, that's all that mattered. So.
I think we have the video here. This was from the NYPD Heroes video from the end of 2001, which is kind of poignant because James Earl Jones died today, who narrates, of course, those NYPD. You may remember him. Heroes, always heroes.
Yeah, I don't think it's in that video because NYPD for a long time wouldn't release that video from Taru. It wasn't until Mark Nell, when Mark Nell was in was in DCPI, and I was contacted because PBR
Mhm.
was doing a 1-year recruitment drive for the Border Patrol, and they were honoring Border Patrol agents, and they wanted to do a video on a song with a video called "Never Forgotten." It's done by Ryan Weaver, and Ryan Weaver is a country music singer who was a 2-star Gold Star family. He lost his brother in Iraq in 2003 in a helicopter, and when he was there as a helicopter pilot. And before his brother got on the helicopter, the last time he seen him, his brother told him, "You should be following your career as a country music singer." Well, anyway, his brother died in 2003, and then in 2013, his brother-in-law was killed in a helicopter in Afghanistan. So, two Gold Star family, right? And Ryan wrote a song called "Never Forgotten." You can Google it. It's Ryan and PBR wanted FDNY and a family from FDNY and family from NYPD. So they asked for our help, my wife and I. My wife did most of the work on it. And we got a friend of ours, a fire department family. And the other family I chose was Vinny Dan's family, his 3 girls. I wanted them to know about Vinny, and be honored with Vinny with this video. Okay. And then we reached out to Angela and Kevin to see if it was okay. And they agreed. And it's an awesome video. And the song is awesome too, "Never Forgotten" by Ryan Weaver.
I have to check it out later. Let me know though, because we'll play briefly, and if it isn't, then it isn't. But let me know if this is it by chance. We'll see if it is.
Sure.
It's coming up right now.
I need my glasses. Oh yeah, that is it. That was in 2001.
Yep, the day after.
No. That video done. I know that's the video from the day after. That's
Okay,
it.
yep.
Yeah, that's us.
It's a heavy hit.
Was that an NYPD department video though?
It was a heavy hit.
Yes.
With
Yeah.
us.
So yeah, it wasn't released to the general
We were
public.
New York City.
Oh no, wait a minute. This is from the song.
Yeah, this is the NYPD Heroes video. It says from I guess from the end of the year from 2001, because earlier in the video it shows the crime statistics for the year and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that NYPD got back from PBR because PBR.
Oh, PBR. It was so originally PBR's
Yeah,
video.
yeah. So,
okay.
So, yeah, because that's the first time I ever did an interview on it.
Mhm.
On it. First time I spoke on camera about it. Yeah. And I so originally I wasn't supposed to be in that video, but the producer for the video, okay, he'd taken Teresa and I out to dinner in Manhattan, and because we helped with some, my wife helped with some of it, okay, he said, "Hey, look, can I interview?" And I said, and he goes, "It's for Ryan and PBR," and I said, "I have to think about it. And they got the approval. Mark Nell got the approval, to be done at Truck 3, to the commissioner. And so I said I'd have to think about it. But I said, I'll come down to Truck 3 because I wanted to see Angela and the girls. But unfortunately, I got there just after because they were going to do a filming, and they didn't want any interruption to that. So at Truck 3. It was the first time the girls ever saw the inside of Vinny's locker, and I think first time Angela held his helmet too. So it was pretty touching. It was heart wrenching actually, but it was just awesome that they were, So anyway, and Greg Dan's Vinny's brother was there as well. So I said I wanted to come down and see Angela, but we had just missed him because Angela had to get to work and the girls had school and whatnot. And so I was there, and his name was Kelly, I think. And he said, "We're ready to go if you want to do this." And I said, "Only if the other guys can be around." Ray Flood, because he was around 9/11. I asked for the guys that were still working if they could be around, and the other guys too, but mostly the guys that were around on 9/11. so that I want to get it right. And if for anything I don't say that's right, just let me know or give me a nod or tell me to cut it. Let's talk about that again. So
Take
anyway,
two.
it was the first time I was interviewed, and they were supposed to hold that video, and then right before we went out to the general public, Ryan, who's become a great friend of mine, called me up, called Teresa first, because you got to go through Teresa. Because half the time I don't even know where my phone is. I leave it on a rock out in the yard, on the trail in the back, or I'll be doing something around the house, and Teresa goes, "Where's your phone?" I don't know. So we've been trying to get a hold of you. Well, then call it, and there it is. So, well, anyway, Ryan said, "Listen, Teresa, start up your computer," and then they called for me, and I saw it for the first time, and I was blown away because I hope I did them justice. Really do.
I think you did.
It meant a lot.
I think you did. Let me see what you sent me, Eddie. Eddie Lutz is in the chat as well. He says, "Good man, Eddie.
Eddie, I'm waiting for you to come on the show.
I'm trying to get you on the show, Eddie. Let me see what Eddie sent to my email here, so I could display it here. He says it's another angle. It's a screenshot he took. So this is one of the screenshots, and thanks for sharing it.
So that right there, that picture right there, it was taken by Bobby Steinman's brother, from what I understand, from Nassau County, and he did it very quickly and abruptly because he was afraid his camera was going to get taken away. And I didn't see that picture to actually, Bobby Steinman gave it to me at John Colgan's funeral a year later.
That's an interesting angle because he's right behind you guys.
I love that picture because it's like you don't know who it is, first of all, and you see the back, NYPD, right, where you can tell it's two NYPD guys, right, and you just see our backs and the flag, and you can see Liberty One there.
Right by the Trade Center.
Yeah, and I really like that picture. He did it, and he didn't get his camera taken away.
At least. Yeah, I think he did certainly do them justice. And man,
there are so many stories from that time that even after all these years later still aren't known, or if they're somewhat known, they aren't that well known until you really go into the nooks and crannies of them. So I'm glad we went into that and deciphered that because, well, listen, it is a part of history. It was a moment in time. And Steve, to have all that wherewithal in the middle of the insanity is historic, and that's true because people forget how much of a chaotic thing it was at the time.
I was just on the phone today, this afternoon, on a project that Jim Lechner, he wrote the book My Shield, just came out. Jim was a lieutenant in Black Hawk Down. He was the lieutenant on the ground. That was his guys. Okay, so eventually he wrote his own book, and anyway, awesome guy, and we talked about books and of course Black Hawk Down. He was that lieutenant, right? And he's mentioned in that book, and the movie. Everybody knows the movie, right? But he said there were things that just didn't fit right, and he wanted to be documented historically about certain things, about what was going on, not just because of Black Hawk Down, but what was going on in the country at the time, I believe, and what was going on that he later became privy to. Right? So anyway, I'm hoping he's sending me a signed copy. I want a signed copy of your book too.
You will get that. I will send you one gladly. You say the word, and we'll take care of that.
Thanks. Let me know, and I'll send you a check. All right.
No, listen. For you, my friend, listen. No money needed. Well,
then I can take you to lunch when I pick it up because we're here in Connecticut, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're both in the same state, so that works for me. That works for me. You say the word, and we'll get.
And I got lunch then. All right.
Sounds good. Let me know.
Dinner, if you're a night owl.
Either way, I like to eat, so it doesn't matter when. It could be breakfast for all I care. So that works for me. We'll definitely have to arrange that soon. And I thinking back when you mentioned Vinny, A&E doesn't. I wish A&E would post the documentary because they're the ones that aired it. But the one that came out on ESU in like 1999, 2000, Joe Guerra's in it. Quite a few guys are in it. And they went around to different trucks in the city, which I like. They started with one. Were you in it?
I made the grab on the guy in his underwear.
That was because it was you and Vinny up there, right?
Garcia was a sergeant, and him and I were on the weight, the counterweight, and
That's
Vinny and Henry were on the ladder well at the
Mm.
other end of the ladder. I mean, that walkway. And I remember McGowan, A&E was running around with McGowan hostage.
Yep. Hugh McGowan was on that job.
Yeah. So we could have got that job done and over with pretty quickly.
The guy was
but
they out.
It was kind of getting dragged out once HNT started helping with the negotiations, and so they said he wants a phone to talk to his mother. We got a phone for him, so they send up a phone. It was a fireman's phone, okay. and I see Pete's I just saw a note come in. Is that from Pizza Gretty?
That's from Pizza Gretty.
Yeah. We went down in the Stokes. Vinny and I rappelled down with Pete. Pete was crazy enough to be connected to the Stokes basket to keep an eye on the patient, right? Right, Pete. So that's anyway. Oh, so if you want me, I can mention that. It was great teamwork. It was great teamwork, though.
That was a great job because I just to go back to that documentary. Pete says he was in good hands. So for context, for those of you that it used to be on YouTube, they took it down, sadly. But I wish somebody would put it back up. But they get called out. It's like the first job you see in the episode, where it's a guy, I forget which bridge, but he ends up kind of shutting down traffic on the bridge. And he's in his own. He's only wearing white underwear. He's wearing nothing else. He's barefoot, everything, and he's running back and forth super quickly. On one of the trams with the bridges, and as it turns out, he's on weed and coke at the same time.
Oh yeah.
So he's on drugs, and you see Vinny. I didn't realize it was you there as well, and Pete for that matter. But Vinny's waiting him out. Go ahead.
Yeah. So they send up a phone.
Yeah.
And we get it to him. Right. I think Juan Garcia got it to him, and so I was perched to make a grab, thinking, all right, if he goes to the phone, I'll make my grab. Right. Yeah. I had to jump from the dumbwaiter of that bridge, okay, on top of that, a few feet over to the catwalk. So, but I was tied in. I had good belay, man, and I asked for a good amount of belay, and so anyway, that didn't work. So he's on the phone with his mother in Puerto Rico, and he gets in for a while, and he gets into an argument with his mother, and then and Pete will tell you, he hoisted the phone out into the Harlem River.
So he just
out into the river. They went out into the water. So we just watched it sail out. Well, anyway, and he wanted a cigarette later on.
Of course, why wouldn't he?
He kind of stalled us for a while. He said, we could have made a good grab and the phone. Well, anyway, so they didn't want us to make the grab because they wanted to have that phone handy for, I think. I don't remember correctly, but it stalled. But, well, anyway. He wanted a cigarette, so Vinny kept getting up out of the ladder well to get to him, but he'd get pissed, and Vinny would go back down a little bit, but make a little extra, make a little less, make a little extra, make a little less, and I was just, and so I think it was Sergeant Garcia said, Vinny, push him towards us, because when he goes up the ladder well, the guy comes back towards us, but not too close. But he comes towards us, right? And Juan knew I was ready to make my grab. So, and he gave me the nod. It was okay, So and Vinny had come up, but Vinny was kind of like this far up out of the ladder well, and chest high, a little more than chest high, not high enough to get up and get moving, but well, anyway. So he was facing me first, and then he turned to see what Vinny was doing, and that's when I knew. I jumped to the catwalk, ran down the catwalk, hoping I had enough line on me to make it to the end. Where if he went off the end, maybe still be able to make a grab, but he would have had to jump over Vinny because Vinny was still getting up out of that ladder well, and there we are. We come crashing down. Vinny got on top of him, and Henry, I think, and then it was the idea was now how are we going to get him down, right? And so we got a Stokes basket, and we got him all loaded up. And Pete will tell you, we got him all loaded up, And he goes, just don't drop me. And Vinny gave him hell for that. Like, what do you mean don't drop you? You wanted to jump. So, and and Pete was lowered down, attached to Stokes' basket. Me and Vinny rappelled down alongside. That was an awesome job.
It was, and it's archived in that documentary. Teresa, I did get your email. Thank you very much for sending that. That's what I was looking at just now. But so it makes sense then, because I think Two Truck was, or I thought all these years, now you just confirmed it, Two Truck was there, because they panned to John Delara at some point during that job, just looking up like, today would be nice. He's got the funniest look on his face. He's like, okay, But yeah, that's a great documentary. Like I said, I really wish that A&E. I'll have to check if they have put it back up, because they did that. Bill Curtis narrated it all those years ago, 99, 2000, around there. So that brings us to the end segment, which is the rapid fire. We have been talking for 3 hours, but it doesn't feel like it. Honestly, it's flown by. Yeah.
Did I eat up all your time? So
no, not at all. I mean, listen, it depends on the guest. So, and I was more than happy to have you tell your stories, and you'll have to come back for a part 2, my friend, because we got some other stuff we have to get to. But we'll go to the rapid fire, and it's 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. If you don't have an answer in the moment, you can say pass. It's fine. First things first. I mean, one of them you already answered. I'm not going to ask you most uplifting call, because helping the jumper and delivering the baby is pretty uplifting. So we'll start with the first one, which is funniest call.
Funniest call? Oh, wow. It would be with Hot Lunch with Ray Newman, former street fan. Ray was my partner.
That was the gun collar. So what was the story with Hot Lunch? Because that is one of the things I was going to ask you about.
So, Ray was my partner for a while in the A team, and then at 3 Truck. And what a great guy, awesome guy. Well, anyway, so we get we're riding around an REP up in a 4.7, and we're helping out as a response vehicle up there to keep an eye, help around patrolling the neighborhoods up there, but be ready for whenever they need us right away. And so Ray sees a car with a violation and says, "I'm going to pull him over." And the car was moving pretty good, so it was in a great neighborhood at that time, and picked a good spot, and apparently the car got jammed up with another car in front of it. So Ray was going balls to the walls, right? But to get the car, so and got up on him, and he had nowhere to go. So we pull up, and we get out, and Ray goes up to the driver's side and gets him to step out of the car, and he was very fidgety. So he said something about he had to get something out of the trunk, to get his ID or license or something like that, and so I think it was more for a distraction of us. And I'm looking at the buildings around, keeping an eye up, anybody throw something down on us or whatever, and trying to keep an eye on Ray. But it happened real quick, and Ray goes, "Hot lunch." I said, "No, that's okay. I already ate." No, I'm just kidding. But he had the guy down into the trunk, going for his gun in the pocket and yelling, "Hot lunch, hot lunch." And I grab him, and the 3 of us go tumbling to the ground and rolled around for a bit, trying to keep him from getting his gun because he wanted it. And eventually we got him to not get his gun and get him handcuffed. And we laughed about it so much later about the hot lunch thing. I wanted soup with it. That's what took me so long. I was going to order the soup, but you had to be there. For me, it's
Jeff came with the day tour.
That's one of those. You have to be there moments. But and again, those codes. That's what makes. And I understand why they use the codes. But some of the codes are so absurd in a goofy. I say that lovingly, in a goofy way. And it just adds to the story, if you will. So, like I said, I won't ask you most uplifting call because you answered that pretty well earlier. We'll skip ahead to the third question. Best advice, either about life or about the job that you've ever been given.
I think, I stop in from time to time at the trucks, and visit guys, and just, best advice for the new guys is, like I said earlier, I think just, keep your eyes and ears open, at least for the first year. I understand what's ahead of you. You're in a great unit, on a great job, right? And a lot of responsibility comes your way, especially when you have the situation cap on, and you'll learn a lot that first year from those guys that are sharing around the table or on a job. Just, a lot of talent in the issue. And the more you get seasoned in the issue, the more talent you have. So if you're a new guy, absorb that talent of the older guys, and with a lot of respect.
Of course, good advice. You answered both the third and the fifth question in rapid fire there, so you got two answers in one there. Well done, my friend. And that so the last one I'll ask you then, since you covered the other two pretty well, I should say, is favorite meal to eat in the truck, either ordering out or somebody cooked up something.
That's real tough because a lot of times we ate off the dashboard, right? And
That counts too.
I know that 4-4 was like that, but I would say steaks from Roger Savage or Dirk Bolson as chauffeurs when like Truck 3, third squad, when it was time to have dinner, they made a nice meal. And when you had time to sit down, at least the steak could be quickly. If you came in late, you still had a steak available. Roger and Dirk were great chauffeurs and amazing guys too.
Well done. This was quite the show, my friend. Quite a way to come back from the summer hiatus. So thank you very much. Before we say our goodbyes to the audience, and stick around, we'll talk off air, Rich. Any shout outs to anyone or anything that you would like to give?
Oh God! Shout out to there's so many. There's just so many great guys. Wilson the Ramblers. I was his company sergeant.
Love Wilson. Good guy.
Very, very great friend. Very great friend. And Tony Otero, Richie Gundacker, and some of the guys that have already reached out. There's just so many. But I gotta say, Steve Driscoll and those guys that we lost that day, and the guys that we've continued to lose. There's so that I know we mentioned some of them, but Ronnie Clover, Santos, just Ronnie wanted me because I was a lacrosse player. I was a goalie, so he said, "We need a goalie. We need a goalie."
He ran. I forgot he ran the lacrosse team for the NYPD for many years.
But I didn't want to drive all out to Long Island to play lacrosse. Kind of hard. If I lived upstate.
Yeah.
But it's it just in Rodney Gillis, what an awesome, great boss, and just Wally Weaver, Jerome Dominguez. There's a picture of Jerome up at Camp Smith, standing next to the helicopter. He took a picture of all of us as a group, and I believe I was the one that took that picture of him for his camera. It was his camera, and he took a picture of the whole group, and he wasn't in it. So. I mean, God, what can I tell you? I mean, just so many, and Steve Bonanno, Barry Galfano, their losses, and I got to say, for a while, a friend of mine was a Vietnam veteran says, don't say you put your head in the sand, but I think I did. When my old partner, Charlie Wassel, and Pete Segretti knows Charlie, we worked in a 4-4 together. He was just an awesome guy. I was by his bedside for most of the time he was sick, and we had a pact, and he tried to hold me to that pact at the very end. And I said to him, he was in bad shape, and he would kick Teresa out of the room, and Ange, his wife, and said, "We had a pact. We had a pact, brother. We had a pact." And I said to him, I said, "Yeah, we had a pact because I thought I was going first." It hurt to watch him pass.
Sorry, bro.
Steve, of course, Barry, and then when my wife lost her father in the plane crash in 2016, he was killed in a P-51 with Jeff Pino, the former president of Sikorsky. They were killed together, and he was like the dad I never had. I lost my dad when I was a kid. I had a stepfather, but yeah. So for a while I kind of went low, like a submarine, And I guess for the 20th anniversary, when my wife and I dedicated our grotto here on our property to 9/11, the 20th anniversary, we invited Wilson was up, and guys from trucks were come up, and Tony Otero, and Ray, and Bobby Downs, we had a bunch of guys up here, and it was Mayor Pete from New Milford, the largest town in Connecticut. He said, "We have a 9/11 memorial, and would you come speak?" was the first time I spoke, other than that PBR thing. But in public like that for in a long time. I didn't, and I said to my wife, and she was surprised I was going to speak. And I said, I guess it's 20 years later, and I didn't think I'd make it this long. I go to Mount Sinai and my other doctors, and I said, I didn't think I'd make it this far, and the rest is gravy now. It's gravy. So I've gotten out there more, and we did a nice event with Equus Effect. It's with horses up here in Sharon, Connecticut, with the Guardian Revival. It's run by a Navy SEAL to help guys, men and women in law enforcement and veterans, suffering from PTSD and other ailments. But so we did that on Saturday, and so I'm getting out more, especially for events like that. We've gotten involved with Heart 9/11 and the SMART program that's run by Yale and Harvard, that stress management and resiliency training. We've gotten involved with that. So, we're out there to try to help as much as we can. I didn't walk away from the help of helping others, but I just kind of pushed back on a few things. If that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, no, listen, everybody processes grief differently, no matter what we've been through. I know when and it's much different than some of the experiences that you've had. When I lost my grandfather last year is one of the things, I gravitated towards people. I've always been taught, I'm like, listen, even though it's easier said than done when you're going through some deep stuff,
Well, God,
if you isolate yourself, it doesn't make it any better. And I say that
I'm
generally.
sorry about your grandfather. I'm sorry.
Thank you. He led a good life. He was 86 years old. Wonderful man. But, that was one of the things that helped me. That and using the same humor he did, but just being around people. Listen, people can really,
For as much as some people may stink, there's a lot of great people out there, too, that can really lift you up. And I've certainly seen that in my life. I know you've seen that in yours. But, Rich, this was getting go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I lost my mom this year, too.
I'm sorry, brother.
Yeah, just a few months ago. And my stepdad, a year and a half ago. So the loss, it pulls you sometimes, right? And so I'm so sorry to hear about your grandfather. And I remember hearing about you losing your grandfather.
Yeah, it's been some time now.
Yeah.
I was blessed to have him for as long as I did. And yeah, he left behind quite the legacy. Hilarious guy, took nothing seriously, which was what part of his charm. Said the darndest things that you probably shouldn't say, but that was also part of his charm. But and Steph says, great job, Rich. Love you, sir. And yes, you did do a great job. And like I said, this was the perfect show to come back from the summer
Thank you,
break.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you to everybody that tuned in tonight. Like I said, Rich,
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me. All right. And I can't believe 3 hours. Wow.
That's all right. That's all right. Doesn't feel like it's been that long. The show has flown right by. I mean, I didn't notice the time until I looked over. I'm like, oh, wow, we've been talking for that long. So this was great. Like I said, stick around. We'll talk off here. I'm just going to say goodbye to the audience real quick. Want to thank you guys for tuning in.
God bless. God bless.
And, thank you to everybody who watched tonight. Eddie Lutz, I'm waiting for you to come on the show, brother. Same thing to you, Pizza Ready. I'm waiting for you guys. Want to talk to you guys, too. And for those of you, whether you be from FD or PD, I know this is a tough time of year for you all. So just thinking about all you guys, and I'll be keeping you in my prayers for, of course, this Wednesday. And thank you for all you did 23 years ago, and thank you for all you're continuing to do now, retired or active. And thank you to everybody else that tuned in. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, he currently is the Special Operations Chief for North Hudson, New Jersey Regional Fire Rescue. He himself was also in the military for a while. I believe he was also a Marine before he went into the fire service. It's going to be Chief Al Prats. That'll be volume 4 of the Best, the Bravest Nationwide edition. And next Monday, I've been trying to get this interview for a while, so I finally did. She was, and she's still active in the space, an investigative reporter for years. If you watch PIX, you saw her all the time. Finally, I got Mary Murphy to come on the show. So I'm really excited about that. That's next Monday, 6 p.m. And like we said, we got Best, the Bravest Nationwide, volume 4, this Friday, also at 6 p.m. In the meantime, on behalf of retired NYPD Emergency Service Unit Detective Rich Miller and producer Victor, and also Teresa Miller, who also was critical, as I mentioned earlier, in setting up this interview, I'm Mike Colón. We'll see you next time. And as the E-men like to say, anytime, baby. Take care. Have a good night. Be safe, everyone. We'll see you Friday.
A DOA, some kind of victim to a burning, whether it was an aerosol can or another flammable liquid. He's burnt, but he's not burnt beyond recognition, and there's no burn marks around the grass. So my opinion is that it didn't happen right there.
My greatest fear on the job is not going home to my kids and family. I did a lot of things that I look back at I shouldn't have done, but I don't leave my house in a fight with my kids because I might not come home. I don't want that feeling that something happens to me and my kids saying, oh, I wish I didn't fight with daddy before that happened. So I hug my kids, kiss them. If they're asleep, I'll just give them a kiss. Maybe they don't know I did it, but it's an inside thing I have to do.
It's a good day's work.
Oh, yeah. We got the guy, nobody got hurt. It's a good day's work.